But without further ado, it is now time to do the snip.
Previously on the Vampire Diaries.
Hey, what's up you guys, it's me Luke, and welcome back to another video, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I post commentary and critique and reaction videos on movies, TV shows, and reality TV with a bit of pop culture sprinkled in between. Today's video is another installment into my deep dive series into the Vampire Diaries, where I recap the plot episode by episode, do an analysis of the characters and their relationships with one another, look into the mythology, the plot holes. We are currently up to season 4. I've made 2 videos on season 4 so far covering the first 5 episodes because we're going extra in depth this season. We'll link them down below, as well as the playlist of like the entire series if you haven't caught up. This is my favorite show of all time. I've been watching it since it first started airing in 2009. Since I was 9, I rewatch it every single year. I know the show like the back of my hand. It's literally embedded in my DNA. So this series is a lot of fun for me because I just get to yap about my favorite show of all time, entertain you, and make below minimum wage doing it. So without further ado, let's get into it because I'm about to dive into my deep dive into the Vampire Diaries season 4 part 3, titled The Breakup Chapter. I originally planned to do a video covering episodes 6, 7, 8, and 9 titled The Sire-bond, but while I was editing it, that ended up being over 4 hours long and I just felt like that was like preposterous, so I've decided to split it into 2 videos, part 1 sort of being the breakup, episode 6 and 7, and part 2 being the Sire-bond, episodes 8 and 9. I'm just going super in depth because we're at the point in the series where the love triangle is at like max intensity, and I just had a lot to say about our 3 main characters and just everything that goes on within these 4 episodes, so I hope you're okay with that, and the Sire-bond video will be coming out next week. So let's start off with season 4 episode 6, titled We All Go a Little Mad Sometimes. So obviously in the previous episode, Elena killed Connor and she had a full mentee B, a full mental breakdown over it, and it's just gonna get a whole lot worse for her because we saw at the end of the last episode that our girl is starting to have hallucinations. So we begin this episode in the Gilbert house. It's the middle of the night and Elena is laying in bed, tossing and turning, breathing really heavily and shakily. She's like clearly not coping well with having killed a human for the first time, and naturally she can't sleep. So she goes downstairs to the kitchen to make herself a tea, and she's heating it up in the microwave when Connor shows up behind her, even though he's supposed to be dead.
Can't sleep.
She turns around and he's no longer there, but then he reappears again with his neck all bloody from where she bit him, and he's like, it makes sense you have a guilty conscience. But Elena tries to calm herself down by saying, I'm clearly having a dream, and Connor's like, well, how do you know that? And Elena's like, because you're, and he's like, go on, say it. And she's like,
because you're dead.
Yes.
and Elena having to say the words means she's really having to reckon with what she did, with feeding on Connor, snapping his neck, and then burying him. And she's trying to calm herself down and rationalize what the hell's going on. And is like, you're haunting me. You're a ghost. You have to be. And she yells out to Jeremy, her brother upstairs, who we see wake up, because remember, he can talk to ghosts. So naturally, she wants to get his help to confirm if this is a ghost. But Connor then grabs her and says, could a ghost do this? And no, they couldn't, because typically a ghost doesn't have a physical foothold. So he starts like strangling her and she's trying to fight her way out of his arms, and she does and goes to grab a kitchen knife and stab him in the neck. But when she pulls the knife out, Connor then turns into Jeremy and he falls to the ground and bleeds and dies. So Elena thought it was Connor, but it was actually hallucination, and she ended up stabbing her brother Jeremy in the neck. But luckily, she looks down at Jeremy's hand and sees that he's wearing the Gilbert ring, the magical ring that'll bring any human wearing it back to life if they suffer a supernatural death. With Elena being a vampire now, this counts as a supernatural death, so she knows he's going to come back to life, but that only half makes her feel better because, I mean, she still did stab her brother in the neck, so she's crying and holding him, and that is our cold open for this episode. So clearly, Elena is going to be going into a dark place. The consequences of her killing Connor are not only going to be her guilt, but are going to be manifested through these hallucinations, which we will find out what they are in this episode. So it's morning time now, and Jeremy is laying dead on the couch, still hasn't woken up yet, and Elena is pacing back and forth, talking to Damon, another person who's killed Jeremy before, so at least they can relate on that. And she just keeps wondering what she's going to say to Jeremy, and Damon's like, oh, maybe you could thank him for not ditching the family ring, even though it made Lark crazy. And Elena gives him a look like she's clearly not in the mood for a joke right now, and Damon's like, you know, Elena, you should have just called Stefan. your boyfriend, remember? And Elena's like, no, I don't want to talk to him. I don't trust him right now. He's keeping secrets. So if you remember in the last episode, he was not being totally honest with them because he was working with Klaus, you know, to keep Connor alive because he's the key to finding the cure, but he hasn't told Elena about the cure. So yes, he has been keeping a lot of secrets from Elena, but for good reason. Elena goes on saying Stefan's been lying to me and he's been hiding things and he compelled Jeremy to forget God knows what. And Damon does know what because in the last episode, he stuck his fist in Stefan's chest, threatening to pull out his heart to get that information from him, and that's when Stefan told him about him working with Klaus. So Damon understands why Stefan has been so shady now and is kind of trying to defend him a little bit without being able to actually tell Elena the truth. Because they can't exactly tell Elena the truth yet because they don't want her to get her hopes up, especially now knowing that she killed Connor, who had the tattoo that was the map to the cure. We'll get into this more later on. So it really would just devastate her to find out she destroyed her one chance of getting the cure. Once again, Damon says to Elena that she really should have called Stefan, but she says she doesn't trust him. But lo and behold, divine intervention, Stefan then shows up and Damon says, yeah, so the thing is, I called Stefan, and Stefan goes up to Elena and is like, why didn't you call me? But Elena doesn't answer that and says she just has to go upstairs and shower, get the blood all off of her. So she leaves, and then Jeremy wakes up from the dead asking what happened, and Damon's like, it's a long story, read the ebook. Which, Damon, it really isn't a long story. Would it kill you to tell him that, hey, your sister's not doing well, she's having crazy hallucinations, she didn't stab you in the neck on purpose? You know, maybe he might want to know that. Like, without the context of Elena having these hallucinations and going insane, it just seems like his sister stabbed him in the neck. So Stefan then goes up to Elena's bedroom and she does not look happy to see him. He tells her, I know you're still upset about yesterday and I get it, believe me, but just let me help you. But Elena says she doesn't want his help and Stefan's like, oh,
But you'll accept Damon's?
which is a fair point, but she tells him,
Don't make this about Damon.
you've been working with Klaus to do God knows what, and don't insult me by trying to deny it. And to Stefan's credit, he doesn't try and deny it, but just says, look, it's not what you think. And right about now, just cut your losses, Stefan. You might as well just tell Elena the truth. Yeah, maybe her hopes would be shot, but at least she could understand why you are not telling her everything and lying about things and not trusting her with what you know. Like, is it really worth the headache? I just don't think upholding this secret and protecting Elena's hopes from being shot is worth losing her trust. Because without giving Elena this information, you do look shady. You're her boyfriend, but you're lying to her, and you knew her brother got compelled, but you didn't tell her, and you're working with their sworn enemy. Like, you can understand why Elena's pissed off. But of course, Stefan being sworn to secrecy by Klaus, Stefan has his reasons and doesn't tell her, and Elena says, I don't know what to think, but I do know that I don't want to talk to you, and I really don't want to be around you right now. And she goes to leave to the bathroom, and Stefan tries to stop her to talk to her, and Elena says no, and shows him her bloody hands, and says, this is my brother's blood on my hands, Stefan. I stabbed him in the neck last night, so forgive me if I'm not in the mood to listen to you try and talk your way out of this. And she goes into the bathroom and slams the door behind her, which is also fair because, you know, she's got some other stuff on, and clearly Stefan's not going to tell her the truth, so whatever he does have to say to her right now is kind of pointless. So over at the Lockwood mansion, Tyler comes down to the living room to see Haley and the hybrid of the week, Chris, drinking. So clearly they were all drinking the night before to pay their respects to the hybrid Dean who died in the last episode via getting his chest blown out by Connor, which this is like the second or third hybrid to die so far this season, and we're on episode 6, so they really are dropping like flies. So Tyler tells these two to go pay their respects somewhere else, like, I don't know, a bar. Yeah, let's not forget that this is the mayor's house. For some reason, Carol Lockwood just seems to be so oblivious to what is going on with all these hybrids and teenagers drinking in her house. Or maybe she just doesn't care. Maybe she's like staying at some bougie hotel or Airbnb and is like, I'm not getting involved, love. I'm just trying to be me. Haley then force feeds a shot to Tyler and he chokes it down, and she wipes his mouth with her finger and then licks it, trying to be all sexy looking at it. It's so intense and like borderline uncomfortable. Like, girl, he literally has a girlfriend, lest us forget. But there is a reason for this, and that reason walks in. So Klaus comes in and he has got a bottle that he's drinking and says, oh, don't let me interrupt. Klaus's person says, thought I'd just pop round to celebrate Dean's successful retrieval of the vampire hunter. Yet when I arrived, I learned that not only was Dean unsuccessful, but that Elena killed the hunter. And Haley tells Klaus, well, maybe if you had let Dean use force on Connor instead of sending him in on a suicide mission. But he tells her, maybe you should mind your business, wolf girl. He really doesn't have much patience for Haley right now because she's just all up in his girl. I'm honestly surprised he hasn't killed her yet. But Tyler asks Klaus the question that many people should be asking, what do you care anyway if Connor's dead? And Klaus says, I have my reasons, which have ceased to matter now. Said reasons being that he wants to cure Elena so that she can be a human again, and he can use her doppelganger blood to make more hybrids. There's then a knock at the door, and Tyler goes to answer it, and it's Caroline with a box of his stuff, giving it back to him, saying she doesn't want it anymore. And Klaus goes up to her saying, Caroline, by the breakup drama unfolding before me, I assume you've met Haley? And Caroline, Tyler, and Haley all look very uncomfortable. And so in Klaus's mind, because of everything that's happened in the last couple episodes, Tyler cheated on Caroline with Haley, and Caroline has found out and broken up with Tyler. So Klaus says to his hybrid Chris, come on, let's leave them be. And they both head out, and after they're gone, we hear the car drive off. Caroline closes the front door and smiles at Haley and Tyler and says, do you think he bought it? And Haley's like, hell, I bought it. So clearly this was all an act, and not much of an act for Haley, because I don't think she was acting that much, because she clearly does have the hots for Tyler. But Caroline doesn't realize this unless she's feigning ignorance, but she just thanks Haley for the heads up that Klaus was there. And Tyler goes up to Caroline, they're holding each other, and he's like, you two girls are such good liars. And then him and Caroline kiss, and Haley just looks so tortured. She's trying to put on a brave face and smile, but she's pissed because she wants to be with Tyler, and this is as close as she can get to it. So the whole reason these three are putting on this ruse was revealed in a previous episode, and it's because, if you'll remember, in season 3, Tyler was sire to Klaus, had to do everything he told him to do, and he broke that sire bond, and we found out that he broke that sire bond via the help of Haley, and now Haley has come back to town, seemingly to help break all of the other hybrid sire bond to Klaus. So that's what they're trying to do, but they're trying to keep Klaus distracted, and Klaus is obsessed with Caroline. He's got the fattest crush on her. Caroline stands rise up. So they're using this fake breakup, cheating, scandal drama to distract Klaus, which is hilarious because this is how much Klaus loves teenage romance drama, that this is enough for him to not realize that they are slowly but surely unsiring all of his hybrids behind his back. That plus Klaus's infatuation with Caroline means he's not doing much critical thinking right now. And this also does clear up some questions we had from previous episodes about whether Haley or Tyler had an affair. It does not seem like they did, although I do think there was some emotional cheating going on there, maybe a kiss, I don't really know. But no, it's not a full-blown affair that we're aware of, but there is a distrust between these two, especially on Haley's side. She's clearly into Tyler, so it's looking like we're about to get messy. Cause I'm too messy. So back at the Gilbert house, Elena's in the shower, and we get some sexier shots of Elena that we don't usually get for her. Usually they're reserved for Catherine. You know, they're showing her blurred silhouette through the shower curtain. They go inside, panning up from her lower back, but it then takes a turn for the worse because the water suddenly turns into blood, and Elena starts freaking out. She's having more hallucinations. So she gets out of the shower, because that's not really the best place to be when you're being haunted. Downstairs, Damon is cleaning up all the blood, which is nice of him. And Stefan comes in saying that Jeremy has left for school because Bonnie has him volunteering for some occult exhibit, which is crazy, like being killed by your own sister and then like going to school that day. But I digress. He probably didn't want to linger around in a house with someone who'd killed him. So then Stefan gets a call from Klaus, who he's been avoiding ever since he didn't stop Connor from being killed. So he answers the phone, and him and Klaus are arguing back and forth. Essentially, Stefan saying that it wouldn't have all gone wrong if Klaus didn't swear him to secrecy, but Klaus is being optimistic, saying that the hunter was one of 5, remembering the history of the Brotherhood of the 5 capital F. So there are always 5 active hunters in the world at any other time, and when one dies, another takes their place. And we know from the previous episode that Jeremy was a potential according to Connor, and when Connor died, a tattoo appeared on Jeremy's hand. But so far, Jeremy is keeping this to himself. Klaus then tells Stefan, we'll find another one. It might take centuries, but we've got nothing but time, right? And Klaus, we see, is walking through a suburban street while on the phone, and he has been for a while. Like, could you not find parking where you were going? But anyway, Stefan says, you're using your calm voice. Who's getting killed today? And Klaus says, not you if that's what you're worried about, but I am concerned about your beloved. Have the hallucinations started yet? And Stefan's shocked by this and asks what Klaus knows about this. And Klaus says, oh, I'll tell you all about it. Where are you? And Stefan says, I'm at her house. And Klaus is like, so am I. And then Stefan and Damon hear the doorbell ring. And Stefan goes outside to talk to Klaus, who says that this would all be a lot more civil if he got invited in. And Stefan's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So they go ahead and talk in the front yard because Klaus still hasn't been invited in, which is good, of course. So Stefan asks Klaus what he knows about these hallucinations. And Klaus says, I killed the original 5 hunters, remember? When one kills a hunter, there's a bit of a consequence. The hunters were spelled by a witch to kill vampires. If you prevent one from fulfilling his destiny, then he'll take you down with him. Stefan asks for some clarification because he's like, no, yeah, Connor's dead though. Klaus then says Connor's death won't prevent him from making Elena his final vampire kill. So this is clearly what's happening to Elena. It's a really interesting concept, this whole like hunter's curse. Once again, adding so much lore to the hunters. They really did a great job with them, actually. The more and more I think about it, the more and more I like it. Even though it's convoluted, I like that vibe. You know, it's so adventurous, sick. Klaus then says, she'll need to come with me now. I lock her up, keep her away from sharp wooden objects. And Stefan obviously doesn't agree to this, even though it's not that crazy of an idea because like they all know that Klaus wants Elena alive so she can get cured and turn into a human. So he's not going to kill her. He's going to keep her safe. And Lord knows he probably has the resources for it. And you guys don't. but it's still fair for Stefan to not let Klaus take Elena. But Klaus does say if we leave her alone, she'll take her own life before the day is out. And Stefan says, no, 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 she's stronger than that. Which I don't know about that, Stefan. Like, Elena's been in a pretty bad place the past couple episodes. She's literally said maybe I would be better off if I was dead. So, like, this hunter's curse, like the goal of Connor having Elena be his final vampire kill, it's not exactly set up for it to be that hard for Connor. Elena's kind of halfway there already. And the hallucinations only just started and she already killed her brother, so how strong do you really think she is? And Klaus definitely agrees with me because he's met Elena and he's like, is she? Believe me, it's for her own good. So up in Elena's bedroom, she's finishing getting ready. I don't know if she thinks she's gonna go to school or what's going on, but if I was her, I'd be staying in sweatpants and a hoodie and just laying in bed all day, but I digress. She looks cute, but then she sees Connor in the mirror behind her. She freaks out and Connor is touching the blood dripping from his neck and asks Elena, would you like some? You seemed to enjoy it when you were drinking from me. And Elena says, I wasn't myself. I was angry. And Connor asks, oh, were you yourself when you snapped my neck with your bare hands? And Elena's like, oh, well, you staked me. And Connor's like, well, because you're a monster and you deserve to die. And this is something he's going to say throughout this entire episode. It's very much his mission statement for this curse. But Elena realizes she's not getting anywhere with Connor, so she kind of just screams and runs down the stairs. Downstairs in the kitchen, Damon is packing some things under the sink, and Elena's like, Damon, but when Damon stands up, Elena sees Connor, and he says, decomposition starts in the first 24 hours. I'm rotting in an unmarked grave because of you. And Elena screams no and goes to run out the front door, and Damon goes to follow her. But when she gets out the front door, Klaus seizes the opportunity, Vamp speeds over to her and grabs her, and they disappear. And Damon and Stefan just stand there with their freaking dick in their hands, not doing anything. Like, guys, where do you think Klaus is taking her? To his mansion. Like, go there. But no, they just stand there and like, well, Elena's gone now, so Klaus got Elena in the end because of the Salvatore brothers not acting quick enough. Tale as old as time. So over at the high school, Jeremy is looking at his hunter's mark tattoo on his hand, and he asks Matt if he can see anything on his hand, but he can't because it's invisible to anyone who's not a hunter or a potential, as we remember. And Jeremy's like, what happens if I told you that I have the beginning of a mark like Connor's that showed up after he died? And Connor said that I was a potential, so... And Matt's like, oh, what does that mean? That you're like the next chosen one or something? And before they can discuss it further, they get interrupted by none other than goddamn April Young. I'm so sick of this girl. So she's holding a hunk of rock, and she's there with that creepy Professor Shane, who thanks them for helping out and says that they all get free admission to his free exhibit. And he's trying to be really funny and charming so people aren't suspicious of him and know that he's grooming Bonnie, which is exactly what he's doing, by the way. He introduces himself to them as Atticus Shane, but begs them to call him Shane, and then he walks away. And April's like, oh, that guy looks so familiar. And Jeremy and Matt are like, yeah, okay. Like, how would they know anything? It's their first time meeting him. April then parrots what she said last episode. Like, have you guys seen Rebecca? She said she was gonna help me look into the explosion at my dad's farm, and then she just, and Matt's like, disappeared. Yeah, we know. And him and Jeremy just like smile at each other and walk away, and April's left there confused because remember, she's been getting compelled to like forget everything for like the past couple episodes, so she has no idea that she's asked them about this. And also, once again, she is so confused as to why no one is wondering why her new teenage friend Rebecca Michelson is disappeared. Meanwhile, her new best friend is a 1,000-year-old original vampire who currently is daggered sitting in a coffin. Back at the Gilbert house, Bonnie is with the Salvatore brothers and is like, you lost her? And Damon's like, no, we technically just don't know where she is. Yeah, that's the same thing, Damon. And once again, I don't know why they don't just go ahead and look at Klaus's house. Guys, this isn't the first time Klaus has kidnapped Elena, okay? The last time he kidnapped her at the end of season 3, where did he take her? His house. I just don't understand. There's a lot of stupid decisions in this episode, but I digress. So Stefan says he's more worried about what Klaus has to say about this, about the hunter's curse, and he said that it was created by a witch, meaning, and they think that Bonnie can solve their problem, but Bonnie reminds them, I don't have my magic back yet. And Damon's like, no, but nothing. Wave your magic wand.
Hocus pocus, begone, hunter, ghostess.
Damon is so pissed off with Bonnie lately because he doesn't care about her. He just wants to use her for her powers, and without her powers, to him, Bonnie is useless. But also, I don't think he realizes, like, she can't just choose to have her magic back. She can't just choose to have her powers. You remember in episode 1 of this season, she lost her powers when she tried to bring Elena back from the other side while Elena was in transition, so she didn't have to be a vampire, and the spirits turned on her and basically took away her magic because she was being a little too greedy by trying to bend the will of nature to constantly help her friends. So witches gave her consequences, and that's why she's now with Shane, trying to work to get her magic back, but she's learning a different kind of magic, which we'll touch on in a couple episodes. Do you think it's good? Do you? because it's not. So Bonnie tells them the spirits won't let me do the magic I need to break the curse, but I can ask Professor Shane for help. He knows everything about everything. Yeah, you don't think that's a red flag, Bonnie? Let's not forget this guy is just an occult professor. So Stefan tells Damon and Bonnie to go ahead and sort that out, figure out how to break the curse with Professor Shane. He's gonna go ahead and figure out how to get Elena back. Speaking of Elena, Klaus brings her into a dungeon in his mansion, which unlike the Salvatore ones, which is just like a hole in the ground underneath their basement, is actually quite nice. It's like a really lush room with like art and like nice furniture, but the furniture is all made of steel, not wood, and there's also no windows in there, which Klaus is like, yeah, no windows to preserve the art, and also so you don't, take off your daylight ring and burn yourself in the sun. And Elena's like, what? I would never kill myself. I don't know why Elena would say that when she spent the whole of season 2 trying to kill herself. That was kind of her whole thing. But anyway, Klaus says, oh, you're gonna want to. Trust me. I did. Problem is, I'm immortal. And Elena's shocked by this and is like, you went through this? And Klaus tells her, yes. It lasted 52 years, 4 months, and 9 days. I was tormented in my dreams, my every waking moment, relentless, never-ending torture. It was the only period of my life where I actually felt time. And it's a really interesting moment because Klaus is clearly affected by this emotionally, which is not something Elena sees from him very often. So this kind of appeals to her and she believes him and this adds validity to it. But she kind of goes off base a bit and says, so you knew this would happen if Connor died. That's why you got involved. Did Stefan know too? Which why would Elena think that Klaus would care about her well-being or if she was tormented? She really should use her brain. Like, Elena, the only thing about you that has ever been useful or desirable to Klaus is your human doppelganger blood. So he can turn hybrid. So like, do a bit of critical thinking. A plus A, B. Like if you could connect the dots, you might want to figure out, okay, yeah, it might be hard to figure out the whole like hunter and the map leading to a cure, but just think, why would Klaus care about me? Why would Klaus want to keep me alive? Duh. So you can become human and he can have your blood again. Like, but anyway, she's going through a lot right now. She doesn't have a lot of energy for critical thought. So back to when she said Stefan knew about this too, and Klaus says, all Stefan knew was that the hunter had to be kept alive. You should have listened to him when he said he had it covered, love. As we know, Klaus is a big Stefan supporter, big Stefan stan, and he doesn't appreciate Elena disrespecting him. Elena asks what Stefan knows, and obviously Klaus isn't going to offer that up and just says, well, that's one of life's many mysteries, isn't it? And he goes to leave, but Elena asks how he made it all stop, and Klaus stops and says, I didn't. Eventually, it just stopped. And he gives her a little tip and says,
the hallucinations tend to appear in strange forms.
And then he leaves and locks the door, and Elena looks scared because shit's about to get crazy.
Don't say I didn't warn you.
So over on the side of some road, Stefan is standing by his motorbike. They are really getting their money's worth with that motorbike. And he is talking on the phone to Caroline, asking if Tyler can get his hybrids away from Klaus. He knows it's hard, like virtually impossible because of their sire-bond. But Caroline's like, actually, it's not impossible. They really have an ace up their sleeve here. We then cut to the Lockwood house where Stefan is at now. Tyler has finished telling him about how Haley is like helping all of the hybrids break their sire bonds, and she's even been helping their friend Chris, who we saw earlier, and the rest of the hybrids. And Stefan, is trying to get some clarification and is like, so are you telling me Chris is no longer sire to Klaus? And Caroline is smiling, saying, that's exactly what he's telling you. So they think they really got this in the bag. Back at Klaus's mansion, the said hybrid Chris is dropping off some stuff in Elena's room / dungeon, and she asks him to just go away. He does, but she was actually talking to Connor, who has showed up again and says, I can't. I'm gonna be with you forever. A constant reminder of what you've become. So tell me, how did it feel when you drained the life out of me? And Elena says it was horrible. It was the worst thing I've ever done. I don't know why Elena doesn't just like try and not talk to the hallucination, but anyway, like if she just gave him the full-on silent treatment, would he not just give up? But anyway, Connor says that Elena's lying and he goads her into telling the truth, and so she does and says, fine, I liked it. I love the taste of your blood. Are you happy? And Connor hits her with the, I'm not happy, Elena. I'm dead. Did you know I had a family? A brother? Now that really hits Elena hard because, she's all about family. That'll get her every single day, even though it doesn't make sense because most people have family, Elena. Like, what does this have to do with the price of bread? Like, most people have family. It's not like people miraculously appear out of thin air, but this obviously hits Elena where it hurts, and she apologizes profusely. And Connor digs deeper and says to her, are you sorry about your parents? It's your fault they died. They ran off Wickery Bridge with you in the car, but they weren't supposed to be there, were they? They died because of you. Now, this is a good tactic. Of course, Connor is like in Elena's psyche. This is like all of her worst fears. She has incredible survivor's guilt from her parents dying because they were only driving over Wickery Bridge because they were coming to pick her up from a party that she ditched for family night. So this really hits Elena where it hurts. And this is why the Hunter's Curse is so good. Like the witches who created the Hunters and embedded the Hunter's Curse are so smart because it's really just Elena's subconscious being used against her. Like that's tea. Anyway, Elena keeps telling Connor, stop, stop. And he says, I'm not going to stop until you've taken your last miserable breath. She says, I'm not gonna let you do this to me. He's like, get rid of me then. Kill yourself. You never wanted to be a vampire in the first place. Now look what you've become. A monster, and you deserve to die. Once again, hitting his mantra as he does. So Elena does actually go with my tactic and tries to ignore Connor, but then Connor levels up once again and says, you don't want to listen to me? Fine. Then Elena turns around and sees none other than Miss Catherine Pierce, her doppelganger, who we haven't seen in ages, since like season 3, episode 9. Obviously, this isn't really Catherine, but it's fun to have her here.
Catherine, do you miss me?
Things are heating up. I love this episode. It's such a good like episode to really like hone in on like all of Elena's struggles, like all like being used against her. It's an amazing episode for that. And Nina Dobrev is doing some serious acting, like Emmy win, Emmy wear, because she's like serving emotional realness tea in this episode. So back at the Mystic Falls High School, it is Professor Shane's occult exhibit. There's artifacts everywhere, including the rock that April Young was carrying, and it's on the display in the middle of where he is, and he points to it and says, you are looking at what people believe to be the world's first tombstone. The item was donated to Whitmore College last month. April, we see, is standing next to Matt and Jeremy, and she's like, oh, I just remembered where I recognized him from. My dad taught a theology seminar over at Whitmore. Her dad being Pastor Young, who famously blew himself and 11 other secret council members up in his house. While this may seem innocuous, and even Jeremy and Matt are like, okay, girl, like, who cares? This will prove to be really important. But anyway, Shane continues with this speech, which is also very important, so pay attention if you haven't watched the show. He says, this tombstone belonged to a very powerful witch. A witch so powerful, in fact, that Silas, that was his name, created a spell that would grant him immortality. Now, legend says that Silas did the spell with the help of a lady witch who loved him, a woman named Ketsia. Not sure why you needed to say lady witch when you were going to say woman, but I digress. He's a bit weird when it comes to gender. Now, as you can probably see, those names are on our board. We have Silas and Ketsia over here. There's another name over here, but disregard that for now. But these two characters, as you can see, we got a question mark over there. We will eventually see what they look like, meet these characters, but they come up at unexpected times and not when you would think. So just be aware it's a bit of a long road here. But anyway, I digress. Shane continues saying, sadly for Ketsia, Silas wanted to give his immortality to another woman, that other woman being this character. So Ketsia killed her and buried Silas alive, leaving him powerless, immortal, and alone. This might actually be the origin story of Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So funny, yes! Okay, whatever. One thing that is also worthy to note is on Shane's slideshows, we do see the symbol of the Brotherhood of the Five, so we can assume that the Brotherhood of the Five has something to do with Silas and Ketsia, the first immortals, who were witches, and we know witches created the Hunter's Curse, so like, if you can put 2 and 2 together, there's something going on there, but of course, if you've watched the show, you already know, but let's not spoil it for everyone because, you know, the stuff gets revealed in the future. Shane continues with his story saying, now it's said that Silas wants to rise again, regain his power, and wreak havoc on the world. Maybe we should be afraid. Or maybe it's just a bunch of crap and this is just an old rock. Alrighty guys, listen, enjoy the exhibit. I'll be around to answer any questions and thank you for coming. So he's trying to play it off like it's not a big deal, but clearly he believes what he's putting down. It's really a big moment. It doesn't seem like a big moment when you're first watching it. You're like, okay, what is he going on about? Especially because the way that we learn about Silas is very like info droppy, but you know what? I can't blame the writers because they've got a lot to get through. So I digress for now. So Shane goes over to Bonnie, who says, that was a nice cautionary tale. Ketsia sounds like a badass. And Shane says nothing compared to Silas. It's very like boy versus girl, whatever. And Bonnie still has flirty vibes with Shane, so I'm not loving this. Back at Klaus's mansion in Elena's dungeon, she's sitting on a chair crying, and hallucination Catherine is like, ugh, don't you ever stop crying? Poor Elena, always the victim. Except now you're a killer. What does Stefan think of the new you? And Elena's like, shut up. And Catherine says, the girl he fell in love with, you know, is gone. You're like me now, maybe even worse. Which I don't know why in any way Elena would believe this, even in her altered state, because Elena's killed one person, and we know Catherine's probably killed thousands, so anyway. But of course Elena's in a fragile state, and she says, I made a mistake, I can do better. And Catherine says, no you can't, you're a vampire, you'll kill again, and it'll change you, and it'll keep changing you until you're just like me. Which that's another one of Elena's biggest emotional sticking points, is she doesn't want to be anything like Catherine, so good job there, Connor, with tapping into Elena's subconscious fears. And Elena says to Catherine, I'm nothing like you. Well, you're a little bit like her. I mean, you both look identical, you're both doppelgangers, you both had to suffer the same fate of possibly being a sacrifice in the ritual, you just happened to go through with it, and you both were in love with and fooled around with both Salvatore brothers, so you're a little bit similar. But anyway, Catherine says to Elena, I was you before you even existed. did. And when Stefan knew the real me, he hated me. Now he's gonna hate you too.
At least you still have Damon. Shut up!
And that part really pisses Elena off because she knows that she's toying with both of these guys emotionally. That was her entire thing at the end of season 3. But of course, we know she was kind of like put under duress and forced to make a choice, but she felt bad for essentially stringing them both along. And now that she's made her choice, and her choice being Stefan, she's still kind of involved with Damon. It's very murky waters here. So Elena screams shut up to Catherine and goes to charge at her, but Catherine disappears and Elena just falls on the bed. So really these hallucinations are amping up. Back at the high school, Damon is sitting at a Lark's old desk and he opens a drawer to find a bottle of bourbon, which yeah, always surprised. A Lark being a known functioning alcoholic, used to hide alcohol anywhere and everywhere and drink at the school. Like, I don't know how he wasn't fired as a teacher. And also, he's been dead now for like, I'm assuming in a couple weeks. Like, he died like at the end of last season. We're on episode 6. Like, how has no one cleared out his desk yet? Or at least another teacher found it. But I digress. Damon takes a drink and he looks up almost like he's talking to a Lark, because a Lark, you know, to his knowledge, probably is on the other side. We saw him on the other side in episode 2, and he says, "You're missing all the adventure, pal." Oh, he misses his bestie. Bonnie then comes into the classroom and introduces Shane to Damon. And Damon's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you. I audited your class," from when he and Elena went to Shane's class at Whitmore College, but they were just like talking through the whole thing. And Damon shows Shane the drawing that Jeremy did of Connor's tattoo. And he asks if he's ever seen this before. And Shane tells him it's the hunter's mark. Where did you get it from? Of course, we know that Shane was working with Connor and obviously hasn't heard from him ever since Connor died. So he's feeling extra suspicious right now, as he should. And Damon's like, "Oh, you know, it just came to me in a dream. So, you know anything about a hunter's curse?" And Shane is like, "Oh, why? You got a dead hunter in your trunk?" And Damon's like, "Metaphorically speaking." These two, they play a lot of word games together. Shane, however, does buy it, which is smart, and you'll see why later. He tells Damon, "Legend says that if a hunter is killed by that which he hunts, then that person will be cursed to walk the earth and torment them until a new hunter is awakened and their legacy is passed on. They're called potentials." Obviously, we know Connor kept calling Jeremy a potential, and Shane says that he's got some research on it in his car. He just happens to have it in his car with his traveling occult exhibit, of course. So he's gonna go ahead and grab it, so he leaves. And it's honestly really good that they have Shane around, because if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have figured out how to break this curse for Elena. So essentially what he said is that in order to break the hunter's curse, a new hunter needs to be awoken. So Jeremy needs to like kill a vampire, become a hunter. We get the drill. So Bonnie says, "How are we gonna find a potential hunter?" And Damon dials a number on his phone and is like, "About that. Little Gilbert, your services are needed." And Bonnie's shocked by this because she's been a little bit out of the loop lately, being hypnotized by Shane. She didn't know that Jeremy was a potential hunter or that he could see Connor's invisible tattoo. So back at Klaus's mansion, Tyler is with Stefan talking to the hybrid Chris, and Chris is like, "Make it quick, Klaus could be back any second." And Tyler's like, "No, he won't." And we see why, because Klaus is over at the grill, and who comes up to him but none other than Caroline. She's had an outfit change. She's trying to look a little sexier for him. Of course, we know she's playing Klaus diversion and distraction, as she does many times, and as he knows she does do, but he enjoys, so he entertains it nonetheless. So like I said, Caroline goes over to Klaus at the bar and she says, "This place looks pretty good considering your hybrid got blown up in it." Which, yeah, a good point. The hybrid got blown up in it the day before, so how the hell did they repair the grill so fast? Oh, you know what, I mean, they're probably used to it. The grill is constantly getting destroyed. But Klaus is like, "Caroline, what do I owe the pleasure?" And she tells him, "I want you to give Elena back." She gets straight to the point, good form, and Klaus is like, "Oh, they sent you here to persuade me. Good form, but I cannot let Elena go. It's for her own good." And Caroline pushes back at this, and Klaus tells her, "Look, I'm not going to burden you with the gory details. I know you have enough on your plate already." Obviously referring to the breakup, and Caroline's like, "That's none of your business, actually." And Klaus is like, "Well, yes, just know that if Tyler was still sire to me, he would have never hurt you. I wouldn't have let him." And Caroline does look kind of touched by this, which is sweet, and Klaus offers to buy her a drink, and she accepts. And he smiles, because usually Caroline is not so agreeable, and it doesn't work. And that should be a red flag to you, Klaus. You should be using some critical thought of like, normally she doesn't respond to my flirtations or offers, so why is she responding now? Clearly she's distracting you, but he is too obsessed with Caroline to realize it will always be his downfall. But as a Caroline stan, I'm okay with that. I'll take all that I can get. Back at Klaus's mansion, Stefan says to the hybrid Chris, "All you need to do is give me access to Elena and I'll take care of it from there." And Tyler says to him, "Help us and then you can disappear. You'll be free." If I was Chris, I'd be like, I'm I'm already on side. Why can't I disappear and be free right now? But I guess you could say he's scared because Chris says, yeah, I'll be free until Klaus sends one of his other hybrids off to me, and Tyler promises him that he and Haley are not going to let that happen. And how are you guys going to stop that? Need I remind you, 2 hybrids have died in the past couple days. I mean, all bad things come in threes, so Chris should be suspicious that they're going to eat their words on that. But he goes ahead with it anyway. Back in the room Elena's trapped in, hallucination Catherine comes back to torment her because clearly Connor realizes that Catherine's getting to Elena a little bit more than he is. So hallucination Catherine says, you were such a good girl when you were human, always willing to sacrifice yourself for your friends. Except, weren't they usually the ones who ended up getting hurt? Which unfortunately is kind of true and does plague Elena because she hates when people get hurt trying to protect her. I mean, that was a huge plotline of season 2 of Bonnie willing to die to keep Elena alive, and Elena did not want that. So Elena says, I never wanted that. But Catherine digs deeper and says, Bonnie lost her grams because of you. Well, no, actually that was more kind of Damon's fault and then like sort of Stefan's fault for going in the tomb, but in some ways Elena was like kind of part of that. And then she says Bonnie's mother became a vampire because of you. And yeah, kind of, because Damon and Stefan did that to save Elena's life because they were being threatened by Elijah. So in some ways it does come down to Elena, but it's not really her choice. But Catherine goes on saying, you know, Bonnie probably secretly hates you. Did you ever think of that? I bet she'd be relieved if you were gone. And Elena's holding back tears now because like this is devastating for her. And she says, I'm not gonna kill myself. And Catherine's like, ugh, why not? Your very existence brings people nothing but pain. I mean, maybe it was worth it when you were worth it, but you're nothing now. You're a monster, Elena, and you deserve to die. Connor's mission statement coming through once again, but it's really starting to work on Elena because she hates being a vampire. She never wanted to be one, and she fears it is changing her. And that's always been a big thing for her, is that she hates people getting hurt trying to save her. Of course, she's the main character, so like the world quite literally does revolve around her. Also, her being the only human, well, not anymore, but like at the time, the only human betrothed doppelganger, the world literally did revolve around her, the supernatural world. So it is what it is. But outside Elena's room, Chris the hybrid tells 2 other hybrids stationed out there that Klaus says the 2 of them need to go and help Tyler, something to do with this girl Caroline, and they believe him because he said Klaus said to, and they have to do everything Klaus says. So they leave. Stefan goes in the room where Elena sees him, but she doesn't actually see Stefan. She sees Connor appearing. Does that make sense? Like she sees Connor instead of Stefan, but what Stefan is doing is what Connor's doing. So she's like, get away from me, stay away from me. And Stefan's like, Elena, I'm trying to help you. But then she goes over to the bed and pulls out a metal rod, and she goes and stabs Stefan in the gut, and then vamp speeds out. So now Elena has escaped. Honestly, Stefan, you should have thought of this. Like, why didn't you just vamp speed, grab her, and disappear? You need to act quicker. Take notes from Klaus when he kidnapped Elena. You guys honestly should have just left her there. She was safe. There was nothing in there that she could use to kill herself. And now she's escaped. She's out in the wild where there's plenty of wood. The sun's gonna come up. She's suicidal. Use your brain. So back at the high school, Damon's at the cafeteria with Bonnie, who asks, how did I not know any of this about Jeremy? And Damon's like, the witch who loses her power gets left out of the important conversations. Classic Damon, but it is really sad the way that he just treats Bonnie like a tool and not a human being with feelings. But Bonnie has been kind of out of the loop this season. And that's probably intentional on Shane's part, who is taking up all her time because he's grooming her. But anyway, Jeremy comes running in asking what's going on, and Bonnie says, we figured out how to help Elena. You need to kill a vampire. And Jeremy's like, okay, great, give me a steak. I'll kill Damon right now. And Damon's like, whoa, easy, Van Helsing. We'll get you one, don't worry. But Bonnie tells Jeremy that he needs to know what he's getting himself into first. And they walk off so she can go give him like prep on what it's going to be like to be a hunter. Because, you know, if he kills a vampire now that the tattoo's activated, he is officially one of the 5 and a hunter. So they go off and do that. Damon then gets a phone call from Stefan and tells him that he figured out how to solve their Elena problem. And Stefan's like, yeah, well, now we got a bigger one. I lost her. She's in bad shape. I tried to help her, but she attacked me. Listen, you go ahead and find her, right? Talk her down. She'll listen to you. Just tell me what I need to do to end this. So now Stefan is letting Damon handle Elena and take control of that, which must really hurt, knowing that he feels like Damon has a better chance of getting through to her than he does. But, you know, we'll discuss that at the end of the episode. So back at the girl, Caroline is looking at her phone where she gets a text from Stefan saying that he lost Elena and they need a vampire to kill to break the curse. And Caroline says to Klaus,
So here's the thing.
I didn't just come here to try and get you to release Elena. And Klaus smiles and is like, you don't say. He really thinks that she came there for other reasons. I love it. I love his optimism. But Caroline says, I came here to distract you so that Stefan could go to your house and break her out, which he did.
And don't get mad.
But he lost her. Klaus then proceeds to get mad, quickly gets up and goes to leave, and Caroline tries to stop him, but Klaus says, Caroline, you're beautiful, but if you don't stop talking, I will kill you. Which no, you won't, and Caroline knows that, so she doesn't stop talking and tells him they figured out how to stop the hallucinations. So he stays with her, and they're obviously going to devise a plan behind the scenes. So Elena's walking down some road in seemingly the middle of nowhere, seeing a bunch of flashes from her transition. First, she hears her own voice say from when she woke up during her transition, I was ready to die. Then we see a flash of her drowning. We hear Connor's voice saying, "You're a monster." We see a flash of Elena drinking human blood. We hear Catherine's voice saying, "You'll kill again." And then her own voice saying, "I can't be a vampire." Then a flash of her snapping Connor's neck. Then Connor shows up next to her and says, "Are you ready to die yet? You know it's your only way out of this." Then Catherine appears on the other side of Elena and says, "You can't take back what you did. It can never be undone. You're a monster and you deserve to die." Mission statement. Then Elena stops in her tracks, realizing she's made her way to none other than Wickery Bridge. I mean, of course. Where else would she gotta kill herself? It's symbolic, it's full circle, we get it. It makes sense. Third time's a charm, I guess. So at this point, Hallucination, Connor, and Catherine are gone. She goes to the edge of the bridge and looks down at the water. Then her mother, her adoptive mother, but like her mother, Miranda, appears next to her. So Connor's clearly unlocked another hallucination character. He really needs to dig deeper. You know, he's tried hatefulness, so now he's going to try kindness to try and manipulate Elena into killing herself. So Elena's surprised to see her mom, for some reason believing it is her mom because she's really that down bad. And Miranda is caressing her cheek saying, "It's okay, sweetie. I know what you're going through. And it's okay. This bridge is where your life should have ended. Not once, but twice. You were ready to die. Remember?" And it's so creepy.
You were ready to die, remember?
Her like soft voice is so creepy. And Elena's crying and saying, "I don't know what to do." And Miranda's like, "Yes, you do, honey. You know exactly what to do." And she looks down at Elena's hand. Elena looks down too to see her daylight ring. And Miranda smiles as if to say like, "Yeah, take off your ring, take it off." And she says, "That's right. The sun will come up and this will all be over. It's the right thing to do, Elena. You know it is." She's being very sweet, but then she's like, "Admit it." And so Elena says, "Because I'm a monster and I deserve to die." And Hallucination Miranda smiles, and Connor is like, "Yes, we got there in the end, guys. Glad we stuck to it as a team, as a trio." So Elena takes off her daylight ring and throws it into the water off the bridge. Some time passes, and Elena's looking out at the sky. We see that like day is about to break, like it's like breaking dawn, but like the sun's not out yet. And Elena starts having second thoughts and says, "I can't do this. I can't leave Jeremy." So Connor's really losing her, gotta reel her in. And Miranda says, "Jeremy's better off without you. Don't you see that?" And Elena's like, "But Mom, he won't have anyone." And Miranda's like, "He'll have you, a ghost who helps him, not a monster who hurts him." Which of course, with Elena having stabbed him in the neck and killed him that morning, that really does ring true for her. Like Connor's really covering all of his bases, and it doesn't take a lot of convincing for Elena to agree. So he's like, "Whew, we dodged that bullet." But then Elena starts crying and she's like, "I'm sorry."
Mommy, I didn't mean to disappoint you.
It's so freaking sad. It really, really is. Oh my god, this episode's gut-wrenching. Sad because she really believes this is her mother, but fake Miranda says, "You didn't disappoint me, honey. You were everything I wanted you to be, but you died, and you were supposed to stay dead." Crazy, crazy. Elena then hears Damon call out her name. She turns around to see Damon, and he's actually appearing as himself, not Connor or her mom. So Elena says to Damon, "How did you find me?" And Damon says, "It didn't take a genius to figure it out. Third time's a charm." Yeah, it's a bit of a layup, Connor. You probably should have taken her somewhere else, but maybe he needed the emotional connection to really seal the deal. But Elena says to Damon, "You were right. Vampires kill people." And Stefan was right too. "I can't live with myself." Obviously, remembering back from episode 2, Damon saying vampires kill people. It's the natural order of things. And Stefan saying Elena's empathy is her Achilles heel. If she kills someone, she won't be able to live with herself. So Damon starts walking over to Elena slowly and is like, "Look at you, being all glass half empty. Let's go talk about this before you do something stupid, okay?" Connor then appears next to Elena and says, "The sun will be up soon. It's almost over." Elena nods and looks to the sky, and it's getting brighter, and then she looks down at her hand where the ring is gone. So Damon notices both these two things and is like, "Elena, where's your ring? Where's your ring?" So back at the Lockwood Mansion, Chris the hybrid is there with bags, and he's talking to Haley and Tyler, and they're like thanking him. They're like, "You did such a good thing, Chris." And he's like, "Yeah, well, let's see how fast a good thing can get me out of town." Well, clearly not fast enough, because after Haley hugs him and says goodbye, he goes to the front door. But when he opens it, Klaus is there, and he grabs Chris by the neck and pushes him up against the wall and says, "When I said don't let her out of your sight, what did you think I meant?" And Tyler yells out, "It's not his fault. It's mine. I was distracting him. It's my fault she got away." And Klaus says, "Well, maybe you're the one who should die." And Haley says, "No one has to die." Klaus gets pissed off because Haley's getting on his last nerve, and he vamp speeds over to her, gets all up in her face, and says, "Did I not say mind your business?" And Haley says, "Tyler was covering for me. I'm the one who let her go." Which doesn't even make sense because Haley doesn't know Elena, so what dog does she have in this fight? Unintended. Woof. Bit of loss, Haley goes on saying, you want someone dead? Go ahead, kill me.
I'd rather die anyway than end up as one of your sired little bitches.
Well, you couldn't anyway because he doesn't have doppelganger blood, but I digress. Klaus looks back at Chris and says, your existence is to serve me, to please me. You understand? And Chris is really scared and he's apologizing, saying, I won't fail you again. And Klaus is like, no, you won't. Now get out of here. Chris goes to leave. God, he just can't leave once again. So Stefan then shows up and stakes Chris in the gut. Chris is screaming, and Tyler's like, Stefan, what the hell? And Tyler's shocked when he sees Jeremy walk in holding an axe. And he's like, Jeremy, what the hell? But first we go back to Wickery Bridge, where Damon says to Elena, we need to get you back inside. But then Connor appears by Elena again and says, it's almost time. Damon tells her what you're going through is a curse, but we know how to break it. We just have to get you inside. But Connor's getting desperate now and is telling Elena, don't let him stop you. I know you want to, but you can't. Don't. And I don't get why Connor doesn't just turn Damon into a hallucination of himself, but I digress. Damon then looks at the sky and he sees the sun's really starting to come up quickly and he's like, damn it, Elena. He goes to vamp speed over to her, but then she vamp speeds in the other direction. They kind of do like a switcheroo. He's trying to catch her. Back at the Lockwood mansion, Tyler's like, Jeremy, what the hell is going on? Klaus smiles. Clearly he's the one who orchestrated all of this and is okay with Chris dying because he's no longer sired, so I guess he's useless to him. And he wouldn't offer up Tyler because Caroline would never forgive him. Evan then looks over to Haley and Tyler and says he's sorry and nods to Jeremy, who has the axe in the air, swings it down, and chops Chris's head off. One of the two ways to kill a hybrid, of course. And Haley screams, blood splatters all over Jeremy's face. We go back to the Wickery Bridge where we see Connor gasp and he disappears. Clearly it's affecting him. And Elena breathes like a sigh of relief, so clearly she's feeling the curse lift. Back to the Lockwood house, we see Jeremy have the hunter's mark on his arm start to grow, so he is officially now a hunter. So that's really gonna create a lot of stuff moving forward. We'll get into that in the next episode. But back to Elena, she tells Damon, it's done. He's gone. She smiles, feeling relieved, but then her skin on her hand starts to sizzle as the sun's coming up, and she looks at Damon like, Damon? He vamp speeds over to her, grabs her, and they go overboard into Wickery Bridge under the water, because I guess the sun won't penetrate the water, and also to get her ring. So in the end, Elena did end up going off the bridge, but unlike the last two times, well, she did survive the last two times. And yeah, she's gone off Wickery Bridge 3 times and survived, so go girl. Go Green Coco, you defied the odds. You defied the rule of threes. But yeah, the curse is broken. And God, the curse was good. Not only was it good just because it was like entertaining and everything, but it also was good because it was a way to really sum up how Elena feels about her transition and all of her subconscious fears and thoughts, and really just took us into this crescendo. Obviously, she's still going to struggle with her transition into a vampire for the rest of the season. It's not going to be as bad moving forward. This was kind of like the peak of it because like these last couple episodes have really just been all about Elena hating being a vampire and being miserable and everything sucks. But now we're going to start finally getting into other places, and this was a really good climax of it all, if you will. So later that morning, Elena wakes up in her bed and she notices that she has her daylight ring back on her finger, and Damon, who has been waiting for her to wake up on her window seat, says that he fished it out of the river for her. When he asks how she's feeling, and Elena says, my head's clear, I can remember everything, but not like I lived it, like it was just a really, really bad dream. You saved me though. Thank you. Oh, I can't believe I almost killed myself. And Damon's like, you weren't yourself. And Elena grabs Damon's hand and says, but if it wasn't for you. And they're looking into each other's eyes, like kind of sparks are flying low key. Like someone needs to remind Elena that she still does have a boyfriend. But luckily Damon pumps the brakes here because he takes, in his words, the high and annoying road and says, I know that you think Stefan's been lying to you, which yeah, he has, but this rough patch that you two have been going through, it's not what you think. Everything that he's been doing for you. And after he kills me for telling you this, I want you to throw my ashes off Wickery Bridge, okay? A little chuckle from Elena, and Damon says, there may be a way out of this for you, Elena. There may be a cure. So we don't get to see Elena's response to this, but she does seem really surprised, of course. But also, I do want to just highlight this section because I think it's really sweet of Damon to defend Stefan, even though Elena's kind of throwing herself at him, so it'd be kind of easy to slip in right here. But, you know, he's being selfless and doing what's right by his brother. Let's see how long that lasts, though. Over at the Lockwood mansion, Haley is asleep on the couch while Tyler is sitting next to her, a bottle in his hand. The vibes are super depressing because they've lost yet another hybrid friend. Number 3, Chris. They're really out here dropping like flies. And to make matters worse, when Caroline enters, she says, Tyler, we didn't have a choice. And Tyler's obviously upset. He feels like he betrayed their friend Chris after telling him that they had his back. And he says, I told Chris if he helped us, he'd be free, we'd protect him. And to be fair, you and Haley agreed to that. No one else did. So once again, there's a clear lack of critical thinking going on here. Caroline says, we needed to help our friend. And Tyler's like, yeah, but we helped our friend by handing over another friend. And of course, Caroline didn't really know or care about Chris, so she's about to say, Chris wasn't it. And then Tyler interrupts her and says, Chris was a friend, Caroline. He's like me. He's part of my pack. All he wanted to do was be unsired by that disgusting piece of Obviously, you're referring to Klaus and obviously not finishing a sentence because it's the CW and they can't swear. But I'm assuming he was going to say shit or asshole. I don't know. It's really weird because they can say dick and bitch, but they can't say everything else. I digress. Tyler then just can't help but wonder, how did Caroline get Klaus to agree to hand over one of his hybrids? And Caroline tells him, I agreed to go on a date with him. You gotta love Klaus. He would kill one of his hybrids, of which he cannot make any more of. They're a dying breed. Hybrids he spent 1,000 years trying to be able to create when he broke the hybrid curse. He would rather get rid of one of those valuable hybrids just so he could go on one date with Caroline. That is how much he is obsessed with her. That is how damn bad he is for her. Tyler's looking really pissed by this, and Caroline's like, oh, I thought it just might help keep up the ruse between you and Haley. And Tyler nods his head, pours himself a drink, and then throws the crystal decanter at the wall. It smashes. Caroline looks freaked. Haley wakes up and is like, what's going on here? Once again, Carol Lockwood, where are you? They're destroying your house. And Tyler's like, oh, nothing. Just paying respects to our fallen friend. And Caroline just looks shook by this. But I mean, Caroline, girl, could you really blame him for being mad at you? This is kind of fair for Tyler. But also, Tyler, you shouldn't have agreed to this plan and think that Chris would have gotten out of it scot-free. But I digress. We then go over to the Mystic Grill where Damon sits down at the bar and orders a bourbon for himself and his fallen friend Alark. And Matt comes over to him. He's busting tables. Remember, he still works at the Grill. Only person in the show with a job. And he states the obvious, like, oh, you're still saving a spot for Mr. Saltzman, huh? Matt, just let him grieve in peace. Damon says, I'm in the market for a new drinking buddy. And then looks at Matt and says, you don't qualify. Well, yeah, obviously for several reasons. Not only is he broke, but he works here and he's underage. But Matt doesn't want to be friends with Damon anyway. And he says, I know you don't like me. But I dug up some stuff about the explosion at the Young farm that I kind of need to tell someone about. Really surprising that Matt's doing any digging or investigating, but this is some really interesting information, okay? So he says, April mentions that her dad knew the professor, which wouldn't be creepy, except he had all that info about the Hunter's curse, and we live in a town where, you know, anybody who knows stuff about anything is creepy until proven otherwise. Matt, who's typically useless, is really bringing something to the table, and Damon even says, you're on the verge of impressing me, Matt. Stick the landing. So Matt continues and says, I got the sheriff to dig up some of the pastor's phone records. Turns out he made a call a day to the same number for the last month he was alive. And on the day he blew up the council at the farm, he called that number 10 times. The number goes to none other than the office of Professor Atticus Shane. So one has to wonder, is Professor Shane somehow behind Pastor Young setting off that fire, killing those 12 people, that massacre? Because when Pastor Young did it, he seemed really brainwashed, and he said to all of those people, those unwilling participants,
We are the beginning.
and, you know, at first we probably thought it was some religious freak stuff because he's a pastor, but maybe it's deeper than that. Getting sinister up in here. Speaking of Shane, though, we got over to his office at Whitmore College, and he's sitting there with Bonnie, because once again, he's training her, grooming her, and he asked her if her friend Damon got everything he needed out of his files, and Bonnie's like, yeah, thanks. I have to ask, though, how do you know so much about all this stuff? He doesn't actually answer her question, but instead he says, Bonnie, I've been around the world 10 times over. I've studied every supernatural creature known to man, and for the record, witches are hands down the most powerful, so I'm in your corner all the way. I'm your biggest ally. But let me just say one thing. When your new hunter, and I know you have one, when he completes his mark, you're gonna want to come to me, because I'm the only one who can help. Trust me on that, okay? The only one. So Shane is clearly very central to this Hunter storyline, and now he's involved with the pastor, so he's a much more important character than we initially realized, and he's clearly grooming Bunny for a reason. So hopefully we find out what that reason is soon, not that it justifies it. Anyway, we go over to our final scene for this episode, a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking episode for Stelena fans. So Stefan arrives to the Gilbert house, and Elena comes out to chat with him on the porch. Sad music starts playing, so like the writing's written on the wall here. It's a bit awkward, and Elena breaks the ice by apologizing for stabbing Stefan, and he says, no, it's all right. I probably deserved it. Damon told me that he clued you in, and Elena's like, huh, I hope you didn't kill him, did ya? And Stefan's like, nah, screw the lies and the secrets. We all want the same thing. We just have to work together for it. Okay, so Elena now knows about the cure. We can all work towards a common goal. They sit down on the steps, and Elena asks Stefan, why did you send Damon to come look for me instead of you? Well, Elena, why did you call Damon instead of Stefan at the beginning of the episode, huh? But instead, Stefan says, I sent him because lately it seems like he's able to get through to you in ways that I can't. You listen to him, you trust him, even when you can't trust me. Elena is like, I didn't mean to, and Stefan cuts her off and says, because, you know, he's tired of the bullshit, Come on, Elena. I mean, after everything we've been through, you can admit it. But before she does, Elena says, "You've been so strong for me, helping me, fighting for that girl that chose you, the girl that I was when I died on that bridge. And I love you so much for wanting to find this cure, because I'd like nothing more than to get her back. Because the girl that she's become," and then she has to stop speaking in third person and reckon with this, and says, "that I've become is different, somehow darker. Who I am, what I want." Stefan rightfully interrupts her and says, "What you want or who you want?" And Elena's like, "Yeah, okay, fine. Something's changed between me and Damon, much more than it ever used to be. It's like everything that I felt for him before I was a vampire." And Stefan finishes her sentence and says, "It's been magnified. Your feelings have been magnified." Well, congrats for finding a synonym for heightened. Anyway, this obviously sucks for Stefan, because like, why couldn't Elena's feelings for him have been magnified, right? And they seem to have been squelched a little bit. And if this is true about her feelings for Damon being magnified, then clearly they were obviously there before. Because remember, she was trying to figure out her feelings at the end of season 3, but she didn't really tell Stefan because he didn't want to know. So like, this also confirms for him she does truly have serious feelings for Damon. And it's tough for Elena too, because her and Stefan broke up when he left town, essentially, and like he said he didn't want to be with her. They went through all that stuff when his humanity was off in season 3. She wasn't really with either brother, but while Stefan was, you know, being a maniac and had his humanity off and obsessed with revenge with Klaus, she was getting a lot closer to Damon, emotionally relying on him. These feelings that she had been suppressing since, you know, season 1, season 2 that she felt for him were now harder and harder to ignore. And she was seeing all these good sides to him that she didn't see before. And, you know, the end of season 3, she was supposed to be figuring out her feelings. And she said she didn't want to make a choice yet because she didn't want to pick one and lose the other. But then when, you know, she thought they were both going to die during the season 3 finale with the whole, like, sire line with Klaus dying and everything and a lark and all that, she was forced to make a choice. So she chose Stefan, but she thought she was going to die. And then obviously when she turned into a vampire, she remembered what all the stuff Damon compelled her to forget. You know, when she met him first and when, you know, he compelled her away the knowledge of his feelings for her, all those kind of things. This is all discussed in previous episodes as well as my Patreon videos. I recently did a video about like the whole last 5 episodes of season 3 covering their love triangle and Elena's choice and all that. So definitely check that out if you haven't. But yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. There's a lot of context. It's not as simple as like your feelings were magnified when you were a vampire. Like there's a lot going on. This is all preceded by everything that happened the last season, especially with the last couple 5 episodes and like of season 3. And yes, Elena turning into a vampire is magnified and heightened at all, but there's so much going on that is leading us to that place. Even stuff that we haven't even touched on yet, which we will, obviously. But anyway, I could like really go on a tangent forever about that, but I got into that more on my Patreon and maybe in a future video. But I feel like I can't talk about that without the true knowledge and context of stuff that happens in future episodes. So let's get back to it. Elena says, "I'm sorry, Stefan, I didn't want to lie to you. Truth hurts." And Stefan says, "You know, before when I was the Ripper, I understood why you cared for him. I mean, I practically drove you to him." Which, yes, Damon was really there for her when Stefan was gone and they grew close and all that kind of stuff. But of course, Elena was suppressing her feelings. Stefan continues saying, "But now, I can't do this, Elena." Elena turns to him shocked, like she thought that he wouldn't break up with her. But then he says, "Not anymore." Because he really has been gracious with Elena's feelings for Damon. I mean, he told her to go on that trip to Denver, figure out her feelings, and like if they came back together, they would. And he was like, "You don't even have to tell me anything." And she was like, how are you so gracious about this? And he's like, "Because I'm just so happy that after everything I've put you through that I'm your date tonight at this dance." Like, you know, all that stuff at the end of season 3. But there's only so much longer he can be gracious. It's not fair for him to be in this relationship with Elena when she's not 100% in it, because she's got one foot in the Damon door and one in the Stefan door. But anyway, Elena just accepts this and says to Stefan, "I know." And that's the end of the episode. And I really like how there wasn't like some crazy cliffhanger. Like we really had this powerful scene for this powerful relationship, you know, potentially, I don't want to give away spoilers, coming to like an end. And, you know, the music, the title card, I just felt like Stelena's relationship was treated with the respect that it deserves, which I appreciate because I love Stelena so much. And also a lot of eagle-eyed viewers and fans will remember that the lines that they used towards the end of this breakup where Stefan says, "I can't do this, Elena, not anymore," and she says, "I know," were actually their code words that they used in season 2 when they were fake fighting to try and hide their relationship from Catherine, to tell each other that they loved each other. So it's really beautiful. I'll try and include that clip from season 2 to connect it.
If I say I can't do this anymore, Elena, what I really mean is that I love you. I can't do this, Elena.
Not anymore.
I know.
Something else that's really important in this conversation is what Elena was saying about the girl, you know, that Stefan's holding on to, and she was holding on to the version of her that died when she went off that bridge. So she's also getting to this place of like acceptance, because she's had to grieve herself. Like, she died and she's had to really go through the stages of grief. All the stages of grief, right? We had anger, bargaining, depression, denial. She had all of those, right? Even this morning in this episode, she had that anger. You know, episodes before was in a place of depression, like all these kind of things. And then now it's seemingly like she's reached this place of acceptance. I just think this is such a powerful, important episode for Elena's character and her transition and her relationship with both Stefan and Damon. This episode is incredibly important in my opinion. So I love this episode. I really, really do. But without further ado, it is now time to do the snip. Oh, I don't want to do it. That hurt. That really did hurt. Bye, Stelena. Without further ado, though, let's get into Season 4, Episode 7 of the Vampire Diaries, titled My Brother's Keeper. Ugh, you ain't ready for this one. Definitely one of the more memorable episodes of the Vampire Diaries. I mean, I remember most episodes, but I highly doubt you'd be able to forget this episode, even if you only watched through the show one time. So it's pretty iconic, and it is a really fun one. Starting off with the fact that it is a return to one of the most iconic events within the show. Obviously, we have a lot of events in the small town of Mystic Falls, but today's episode is a return to the Miss Mystic Falls pageant, previously seen in Season 1, Episode 19, and we're getting to it today. So this is also really interesting to discuss, because from this point in the show to Season 1, Episode 19, it has been only a year. Even though we're in Season 4 and that was Season 1, been only a year. So it's really interesting to see how far our characters have come within a year, you know? Anyway, so this episode begins in the woods where Stefan is working out to blow off some steam while he's on speakerphone with Caroline, who's at the Lockwood Mansion doing prep for the Miss Mystic Falls pageant as, of course, the reigning Miss Mystic Falls. And also because that girlie loves to organize things. I love whenever Caroline's in charge of something. It's just a lot of fun. So Caroline says to Stefan, "What do you mean you're not coming? I don't need to remind you that your Miss Mystic Falls attendance record totally sucks." Which, of course, if you'll remember, at the previous Miss Mystic Falls pageant, Stefan bailed on Elena as her escort because he was too busy feeding on Amber Bradley. Because, of course, at the time he was having a Ripper relapse. Caroline continues saying, "Besides, you're a founding family member. By definition, you have to be there." But Stefan disagrees, saying, "Elena and I broke up. By definition, I don't need to be anywhere." And Caroline's like, "Ugh, did that sound as depressing to you as it did to me?" As Stefan's continuing to work out, looking very sexy, he says, "I'm not depressed." Okay, King, you're in denial. But he does say, "I just want to rip into someone's artery and feed until I can't breathe anymore." And Caroline tells him, "Well, as your sober sponsor, I won't let that happen. Try and sublimate," which... Okay, Caroline, great advice. Sublimate, aka go get day drunk on bourbon, which normally Stefan would do, but today he goes for a more unorthodox approach. I really do love how much they're leaning into the alcoholic allegory. Like, they did it a little bit earlier on, but now they're not even trying to hide it. Like, they're full on saying that Caroline is Stefan's sober sponsor. Anyway, Stefan lays down on the ground and stares at the sky, and he tells Caroline the truth behind his and Elena's breakup, which is that Elena has feelings for Damon.
What?
Caroline's really shocked by this, which I don't know why, because, I mean, first of all, it's pretty obvious. But second of all, Season 3, Episode 4, which was not that long ago in the timeline of the show, she said to Elena while Stefan was still missing just before he came back to town that Damon had gotten under her skin. There's something going on there and she should just admit it. And Elena, without admitting it, essentially alluded to it. So Caroline, she's aware and has been aware that there's something going on between Damon and Elena, but she's been pushing that Stelena train as hard as she can. So girl, even you can admit that it's not that surprising Elena has admitted finally that she has feelings for Damon. But of course Caroline's going to be in denial too, because she really doesn't like Damon. So she says, referring to Elena, she can't have feelings for Damon. He's Damon and you're you, and I'm revolted. You know what? I'm gonna go talk to her. I'm gonna shake some sense into her clearly diseased brain. She's being a bit harsh, but of course we know Caroline has reason to not like Damon, namely that he fed on her, compelled her, abused her, and manipulated her back in the beginning of the show, Season 1, which in the timeline of this show would probably be like a year and a little bit ago, maybe a year and a half. And it's something they never really properly address in the show, and I will address it more in the next episode because it's a bit more pertinent there. But on the other side of Caroline's opinion on Damon and Elena having feelings for him, she never gets to see the side of Damon that Elena gets to see, because Damon really only shows his good side to Elena and Stefan. And of course, Alok back in the day, but Alok's dead. So this is why pretty much no one is a big fan of Damon and everybody is Team Stefan. And once again, this is something we'll discuss in the next episode. I know I'm being very ominous, but once we get to the end of this episode, you will know why, but I don't want to spoil it just yet. So Stefan says, I don't know what good that's gonna do. Elena's right. Being a vampire has really changed her. And Caroline says, all the more reason to cure her. So now she clearly knows about the cure too. Stefan's just telling anyone and everyone. Caroline then turns around to see Elena walking towards her and says she's gotta go. She says goodbye to Stefan and hangs up and tells him to be careful. Remember, there's sublimating and then there's insanity. So let's see if Stefan does do anything insane today. And when he hangs up the phone, Klaus Vamp speeds out of nowhere, grabbing Stefan by the neck from behind, and he says, in what worlds did tell no one mean tell your brother and every teenage sycophant in town? Which, yeah, at this point Stefan isn't really being tight-lipped about the cure secret anymore, but come on, he really tried as hard as he could, and Damon literally shoved his hand into his chest, grabbing his heart just to get the answer out of him. And then Damon told Elena, and then I guess Stefan told Caroline because, you know, that's his support system and he probably doesn't want to talk to Damon and Elena right now. So it is what it is, Klaus. At this point, get everyone on board. Like, you all want the same thing, which is essentially for Elena to be cured, and it was bound to come out eventually. So as much as you think you can't control everything. Stefan says the secret's safe. No one who knows about the cure will endanger us. Trust me, you know I want to find it more than anyone else. And Klaus tells him, well, then I suggest you find some vampires for Jeremy to kill before I'm tempted to offer you up as a victim. And try to keep this one to yourself, why don't you? So with this episode's title, and in the last episode, Jeremy being activated as a hunter, it stands to reason that My Brother's Keeper clearly refers to Jeremy and the scary journey he's about to go on. So strap in, y'all. It's a bumpy ride, but it's so much bumpier than you would even think, because this isn't even the craziest of all things that are about to unfold. And I gotta say, I really do like this whole like hunter storyline for Jeremy. It's really fun because he hasn't really had a storyline for himself since like the ghost storyline back in the beginning of season 3. So over at the Salvatore house, Stefan is walking about to leave with a duffel bag looking like he's on a mission when he bumps into Damon, who asks where he's been. Stefan's like, out. And Damon's like, okay, where are you going? And Stefan's like, out. And Damon's like, oh, okay, I see Shady Stefan's back. Stefan stops walking and smiles to himself and says, okay, you obviously haven't heard what happened. And Damon looks at him clueless, and Stefan's like, Elena and I broke up. Damon's holding back his smile and he refrains from getting into all of that, even though it would be nice to check in with his brother, ask if he's okay, but we know that they kind of dot around the emotions of it all. And besides, I guess that's not really a priority because Stefan breaking up with his girlfriend makes it a lot easier for Damon to get on in there. Damon says, okay, got it. Well, I'll be quick then. So apparently, if we want to find a cure, we have to find a vampire hunter who can kill enough vampires to reveal the map on the hunter's mark. Now, unless we want Jeremy to go all Connor 2.0, I suggest we find a different hunter. A nice little expositionary dialogue just to kind of refresh our memories on like what the point of getting the cure is and how to do it, how it interlinks with the hunter. We all got that, right? But of course, being one of the first people on the hunt for the cure, this isn't news to Stefan, and he's just like, okay, and, which, by the way, I gotta say, I love sassy Stefan. But Damon ignores it and goes on saying, okay, well, I was gonna ask Professor Shane, but it turns out he's even shadier than you are. Matt Donovan, of all people, connected him to the pastor through phone records. Apparently, the two were very chatty the day the pastor blew the council up. Once again, some more expositionary dialogue to remind us there's a lot of lore in season 4, so every episode there's dialogue that's gonna have to keep refreshing our memory. It's kind of irritating when you're like binging the show, or like, you know, that kind of stuff, but back when the show was coming out week to week, you know, it was really helpful to like keep track of what the hell was going on. Stefan says, okay, I get it. You're gonna confront Shane, threaten him, possibly kill him, that sort of thing. And David's like, yeah, you want a tag team? But of course, Stefan's not gonna be interested in working with Damon on this because he already has to work with Klaus, not to mention he probably doesn't want to be around him right now, considering that he's sort of the reason that he had to break up with Elena. So he just tells Damon, nah, you're on your own. But Damon's not letting that go. He's really trying hard. And he grabs Stefan, stopping him, and says, oh, we could just blow it off. Go get drunk, brother bond over some sorority girls, you know, that kind of thing, quality time. He's trying really hard to put on that genuine caring front, and maybe he does care a little bit about Stefan about this, but like, let's not act like he's not happy about the situation. And Stefan feels the same way, basically saying, cut the bullshit. He has a little chuckle and says to Damon, let's not pretend like this isn't the best day of your life. And he just walks out, which Damon's left there like, damn, okay, well, I did try, but it kind of is the best day of my life. It does kind of suck that Stefan's so pissed at Damon, and Damon's trying, but he's blowing him off. It already kind of shows what Elena was afraid of at the end of season 3, that once she made a choice, it would like tear the brothers apart. And unfortunately, that was going to happen either way. We saw that a lot in the beginning of the season where Damon was bummed and wanting to leave town and depressed, and now Stefan's going to be the one who's bummed and depressed. Like, whichever brother is not with her is just going to be bummed and depressed, essentially. And of course, I discussed that a lot in my Patreon video about the last 5 episodes of season 3. We get a lot into like the love triangle and Elena's choice and the impact it has on each Salvatore brother. Over at the Lockwood Mansion where Miss Mystic Falls pageant is being held, obviously it being the house of the mayor, Mayor Carol Lockwood, everyone's prepping for the pageant, and Caroline goes over to Elena and says, look, I'm your best friend. I would never pick sides, but are you sure that this is what you want? Because Stefan Stefan is your soulmate. And Elena gives her a look and Caroline's like, oh, okay, picking sides, I'm sorry. Which, yeah, she is, but let's be honest, like 90% of the characters in the show are Team Stelena. Even Klaus is Team Stelena, and he wants Stefan for himself. Of course, in Damon's defense, like I said, this is partly due to, yes, all the horrible things he's done and that have affected a lot of our characters, but also because a lot of them don't get to see the side that Elena sees in him, which is very much giving that trope of like girls who are like into like guys who are like mean to everyone else, but like nice to them, which is kind of toxic, but you know, toxic romances and teen TV shows go together like oil and water. Well, oil and water don't go together. Oil and salt when you're boiling pasta? What goes together really well? I don't know, I'm like having a mind blank. Anyways, Elena says, it's not like I don't like Stefan anymore, but I can't deny that ever since I turned, my feelings for Damon have become more intense. Which no matter which way you swing it, that's kind of messed up. Because the only way to go about this that wouldn't be messed up is that if you weren't with either brother because you have feelings for both of them, and it's not fair to either of them to toy with both of their feelings. And not only would that be the right thing for you to do for them as individuals, but for their sibling relationship as a whole. I think what Elena should do is not be with either Salvatore brother and wait till she figures out her true feelings. Okay, like you need to fully move on from Stefan and then be with Damon. But girl, the mismatch wishy-washy involved with, like, it's giving Catherine, which you say you don't want to be anything like. Just saying, but you know, I'm jumping the gun. Maybe there's a logical reason why Elena is, you know, been trusting Damon so much and confiding in him. Let's not forget when she fed on him, even though he said that that was an intimate thing for vampires to do with one another, all the times that she has called him and confided in him instead of Stefan when she was still with Stefan. Let's see. Something else I want to touch on, which Elena already like said when her and Stefan were breaking up, about how her feelings for Damon have been magnified. Like, does this mean, like, why would people not be questioning, like, does that mean her feelings for Damon are more intense than her feelings for Stefan? Because shouldn't, in theory, if vampires' feelings are magnified, shouldn't her feelings for Stefan be magnified too? And if her feelings for Damon are so strong that she's leaning towards him instead of Stefan, does that mean that her feelings prior to turning were stronger for Damon than they were for Stefan? These are the questions that no one's asking, but I am. And look, I don't want to be too harsh on Elena because obviously we can see why she has feelings for Damon and Stefan, and I love the love triangle. It's such an important part of the show, but I do think that I would have preferred if she had a little bit of healing time, gave Stefan a beat, you know, before switching brothers so quickly. But obviously this is kind of like a divisive issue. I'm really curious about what you guys think Elena should have done. Comment down below. Anyways, back to the conversation between Caroline and Elena. Caroline says, yeah, I know, Stefan filled me in on all the gory Damon details. Elena's surprised by this because she's been so involved with her own stuff that she hasn't noticed how close Stefan and Caroline have gotten. But she does ask if Stefan's okay, and Caroline's like, no, he's obviously heartbroken. And Elena's like, well, what was I supposed to do? Lie to him? Which Caroline says, no, you weren't supposed to let Damon weasel his way into your confused newbie vampire heart. Which, to be fair, he kind of weaseled his way into her heart before she turned into a vampire. I would honestly say that this is like a really great parallel in this episode with the whole Mystic Falls pageant, because that's probably when Elena started developing feelings for Damon, back when, you know, he was her escort when Stefan was gone at the Mystic Falls pageant, and they had that dance of like the intimacy of the near touch. Like, you know, maybe they were slow and steady because she was still with Stefan for a much longer time after that, but there were feelings that had been bubbling and building for Elena. She just was suppressing them and not wanting to, you know, let herself admit that she did have feelings for Damon because she didn't want to be unfaithful towards Stefan. And for the most part, she wasn't, but this season it has not been the case. She's done a lot of unfair things towards Stefan, gotten a little too close towards Damon, like when they were at the frat party. Like, you know, the stuff she's been doing has not been entirely faithful to Stefan. At the very least, she emotionally cheated, but who knows, maybe there's a reason for that. Which honestly, those of you who watch the show are probably just like getting annoyed with me and just being like, shut up, just get to the point. I'm not gonna like do this the whole episode, or maybe I will. But for those of you who haven't and are like kind of experiencing the show for the first time through this, which honestly, can you comment down below if any of you are? I would be really curious. Like, is anyone not watching the Vampire Diaries who's watching this series in my channel? I'd be curious. Anyways, in response to Caroline saying that Elena shouldn't have let Damon weasel his way into her heart, Elena says, well, he did, and that's exactly what I am, confused. I need to figure out what these feelings actually mean. Which, to be fair, I'm doing that again, playing devil's advocate. That's what Elena was doing at the end of season 3, was figuring out her feelings. Stefan said as much before they were, you know, supposed to get together again, after he came back to town and his humanity went back on and became like the good brother again. He told Elena, like, admit that you have feelings for Damon. And she's like, I don't know, I'm confused. Like, and then he was like, okay, go figure those feelings out. She went to Denver, Colorado. They had their motel kiss, but then they fought, and it was like a whole thing. And before they could like really figure out stuff, before Elena could like figure out her feelings for both brothers more, before she made like the right choice, like she didn't want to make that choice, but then she was put under duress when she thought that they were both going to die, and she made the choice of choosing Stefan in a stressful situation when she was not ready. So we're dealing with the aftermath of all that. Oh, poor Stefan. He probably was like, yes, she chose me. Everything's gonna go back to normal. Little did he know. Little did he know. And of course, I also forgot to mention that with Elena's transition into a vampire, she also remembered all of the memories that Damon compelled her to forget. So that's added to the confusion as well. Girlie is hella confused right now. I can't even imagine how confusing it must be, especially when Stefan was gone between season 2 and 3, and also the beginning of season 3. Like, Damon was Elena's emotional rock. So she has been going through a very confusing time, and this is why I think she should have waited before she does what she does. But she doesn't. But anyways, then Professor Shane walks up to the two of them and says that he's lost. He's there to interview the contestants, and he's looking for like where the judges have to meet. And Elena recognizes him from her field trip to Whitmore with Damon and Bonnie and is like, "You're Professor Shane, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, right. Professor by day, pageant judge by other day." And in spite of being absurdly unqualified, I'm apparently awarding a scholarship. Yeah, you are underqualified. Why the hell is he the judge at a teenage, like a high school beauty pageant? It just makes no sense. He's an occult professor at the nearby university. He's infiltrating his way into this town a little bit too much. Not only did he have the occult exhibit at the high school in the last episode, now he's judging Miss Mystic Falls. He clearly just wants to be around the teenage girls. And you know, I couldn't help but notice that since the last episode, he's had a shaved face, almost like he's trying to appear younger, so it's less creepy that he's hanging around the teenage girls when it's like, no, you're a 30-year-old man. Which, yes, I know is kind of ridiculous considering Damon is turned at 25 and is like 180 years old or something, but it's just not the same. It's not the same. It's different. It's different. But anyway, Caroline points Professor Shane in the right direction, and he's like, all right, I'll go follow the scent of hairspray and world domination. And he leaves, and Caroline musters a fake laugh, which she's more polite than I am, because he thinks he is so funny. He's got these one-liners that are just so bad. Like, dad joke doesn't even begin to describe it, but I digress. As they're watching Shane walk away, Elena says he's the one who told Damon how to break the Hunter's curse. And Caroline's like, yeah, and he's also the one that has Bonnie so obsessed with practicing magic that she bailed on pageant prep. So it's just a little housekeeping to explain why Bonnie isn't in this episode. I mean, she was never really that involved in the Miss Mystic Falls pageant back in season 1. But you know, Bonnie is missed. I wish Bonnie and Caroline were in every episode. But anyways, back to talking about Professor Shane, Elena says, okay, so now he's judging Miss Mystic Falls. Jack of all trades or kind of creepy. Yes, girlies, let's get on to that. We've been saying Professor Shane is creepy since the moment we met him, and you should really be concerned that your best friend Bonnie is spending so much time with him. But instead, they're too preoccupied with their own stuff, which, you know, fair enough, they do have a lot going on, but you could look out for your friend. We then go over to Jeremy and Matt, who are also helping with pageant prep. They're unloading a bunch of stuff like boxes of like drinks and champagne and stuff from Matt's truck, and they're chatting. You know, these two have really become besties since last season, which is great because I really like this friendship as opposed to Matt and Tyler. And even when Jeremy had his weird frenemies things with Tyler, I think Matt and Jeremy, they're a good friendship fit. And it's nice that Jeremy's not so much of a loner anymore. Anyways, Matt says to Jeremy, so your sister's making me be her date. Do I have to do that weird dance thing? And Jeremy's like, oh no, I'm pretty sure that's just for the contestants. And Matt says, I heard that you're April's escort. How'd that happen? Jeremy says she needed a date and apparently you were taken because, you know, Matt and Jeremy are like the two guys that April knows. And in her mind, she's like, ooh, which one am I gonna pick? Since they're both clearly into me, even though like they both could not care less for her, but I digress. Jeremy's like, yeah, I got nothing on. I was going anyway. Sure, I'll be your escort, whatever. And she's like, oh my God, thank you. Wow, oh, it's crazy. April cracks me up. Anyways, Matt says they'll take the stuff in and then they'll come back for the kegs. But Jeremy's like, no, wait a sec. Look at this. He wants to show him something cool. So he jumps up into the bed of the truck and picks up a keg with each hand, like those heavy metal kegs of beer, which are hella heavy, and like brings them down himself. It's sick. It's impressive. And Matt's like, whoa, how'd you do that? And Jeremy's like, I don't know. You know, ever since I was awoken as a hunter, I just have all this energy. Yeah, because you're supernatural now. Matt's concerned by this, kind of seems like one of the only people who is, and is like, look, Jer, I think you need to talk to someone about this. I mean, look what happened to Connor, okay? A byproduct of this energy is that you're gonna want to kill vampires, and you happen to live with one, which is a smart comment from Matt. You know, he's actually, for once, using his brain at the moment. But Jeremy seems to be really naive about the situation, or at least doesn't want to, like, worry too much about it, and says, nah, I would never hurt my sister. I'll be fine. Then over at the Mystic Falls Hospital, Stefan is looking at patient files, which is confusing at first, until he notices a room with a guard in front of it, and he compels him to take a break, goes inside, sees this guy handcuffed to the bed, and it's pretty clear at this point where he's going with this. So he asks the guy why there's a cop there. The guy's like, oh, I'm a convicted murderer. At this point, Stefan hasn't even compelled this guy, he's just openly telling him, but then he does compel him, asking if he's guilty. The guy says, of course I am. And Stefan's like, do you have any regrets? And he's like, only that I got caught. So to Stefan, this is like the perfect victim for Jeremy. So he force feeds his blood to the guy and snaps his neck. So he's clearly going to turn him into a vampire for Jeremy to kill. Of course, because of Klaus's instructions to grow Jeremy's mark. And for Stefan, this kind of guy's perfect because he's not going to have any guilt about getting rid of a bad person. And you see, I've always thought that about vampires when they get all upset about not wanting to hurt people or like, oh, I wish I could feed on humans instead of drinking blood bags. It's like, why don't you just go find criminals and feed on them? That's what I would do. Get rid of the horrible people. Be the legal system. Be the change you want to see in the world. Back at the Lockwood Mansion at Mystic Falls Prep, Caroline is supervising when 3 girls arrive with flowers and she stops them like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Those flowers go in the back. As per the floral arrangement chart that you had plenty of time to memorize, the girls roll their eyes and give her attitude and walk away, even though it's like, come on, just like do what she said. It's not that hard. But at the same time, they look like high schoolers who are volunteering and they're not getting paid. So she's being a little harsh, but of course when it comes to event planning, Caroline runs a tight ship. And Klaus thinks so too because he shows up and says, now how did I know I'd find you at the helm of this ship? And Caroline's like, go away, I'm busy. Klaus ignores that and says, I was wondering what time I should pick you up tomorrow. Caroline says, how about a quarter to never? And Klaus puts on his serious voice and says, I was promised a date in return for one of my hybrids. And Caroline's like, yeah, a date to like a movie where we don't have to talk and I can put at least 3 seats between us. She's still playing like she's not interested in him. She's playing hard to get, even though deep down we know that you're kind of looking forward to this. And Klaus says to her, surely the reigning Miss Mystic Falls won't be hosting this party alone. And well, I assume you're not taking Tyler, right? Not after his indiscretions with his lady werewolf friend. And this is a really good play, even though Klaus doesn't realize it because he actually does believe. But Caroline agrees to this so she can keep up the ruse that her and Tyler have broken up so that Klaus won't be suspicious, etc., etc. We'll discuss that a little bit later. So Caroline says, fine, if you insist on coming, meet me here at 2 p.m. sharp, black tie optional, and I already have a dress, so don't even think about getting me so much as a corsage, you understand? Obviously referencing when Klaus got her a dress for the Michelson Ball, cutesy, but this time she's like, no, I will be choosing my own outfit, thank you very much, do not upstage me. So she goes to walk off and Klaus yells out, I'll see you tomorrow, Caroline. And he's got this huge smile on his face, he looks so cute, he's got his hands behind his back like a little kid all excited. Honestly, this is going to be such a fun episode to talk about because it is a big, heavy Caroline episode. One of my top 5s, maybe top 3s for Caroline episodes. There's just so much good stuff in this one, so I'm excited. We then go over to a barn at Pastor Young's farm, obviously abandoned considering he's dead and he blew his house up. So Tyler and Haley have taken over this barn to use as the place where they help their hybrid friends break their sire-bond to Klaus. And if you'll remember from season 3, how Tyler did that was by turning into a wolf over and over again until it didn't hurt anymore, so that he was no longer grateful to Klaus for freeing him from turning every full moon, therefore breaking his sire-bond to him. So now they're trying to do that to all of his hybrid friends. So the hybrid who is currently turning and trying to break their sire-bond is a new character named Kim, another hybrid of the week, whatever. Let's see if this one lost the episode. So she's chained up and turning and she's screaming in pain, and Haley tells her, scream, let it all out, no one can hear you for miles. Don't wanna scream and shout and let it all out. So Kim's really pissed, saying, easy for you to say, wolf girl, you've never had to turn 20 times in a row. To which Haley, with her arms crossed on her high horse, says, but I've watched a bunch of your hybrid friends go through it. Which, girl, come on, that is not the same thing. It's not the same as going through it yourself, so that's just a terrible rebuttal. Kim asks why it has to be like this, which gives Haley an opportunity for some expositionary dialogue, which she explains how to break the sire-bond, which I already told you. But at the tail end of that sentence, she says, you have to turn until it doesn't hurt anymore, so you have nothing to be grateful to Klaus for, therefore breaking your sire-bond to him. But Kim does ask Haley a very valid question and says, what's in all this for you? And Haley looks really uncomfortable by this question. Clearly, she has something to hide. But instead, she just says, I don't hear bones cracking. So naturally, Kim starts cracking some of her bones while she turns. Tyler then shows up and says, Caroline bought us another day. Klaus wants to take her to the Miss Mystic Falls pageant tomorrow. Haley smiles, saying, does this mean we're going? And Tyler says, watching Klaus fawn over Caroline at some lame-ass pageant? No thanks. And Haley's like, come on, we need to hide what's going on here by pretending that I was the one who broke you two up. And besides, isn't it at your house? Which is kind of a weak reason, because I don't really think Klaus would notice if the two of them weren't there. He'd probably just think that Tyler didn't want to be anywhere near Caroline since they broke up. And it's not really entirely necessary. I think Haley just really wants to go on a date with Tyler because she clearly has the hots for him. But this is enough for Tyler, and he's like, fine, we'll go. Wear a dress. Because of course, Haley's a tomboy. And he leaves, and Haley smiles because she is so excited to have her fake date with Tyler. Over at the Gilbert house, Elena's in her room in front of a mirror, and she's really struggling to get her necklace off. So when Jeremy enters, he offers to help her. He goes behind her, unclasping her necklace. It's taken a weirdly long time. And Elena tells him that she picked up his clothes from the dry cleaners for tomorrow, and they should be hanging by his door. And Jeremy, who's still behind her, says, I really wish you would stop acting like you were still my sister. She looks kind of confused until Jeremy starts choking her with her own metal necklace, and he's strangling her. There's blood coming out of her throat. And then Jeremy wakes up in his bed, drenched in sweat. So it was all a bad dream. And he has got a knife in one hand and a stake in the other with the hunter's symbol carved into it. So he's been whittling in his sleep. He's having a nightmare and he's whittling a cough. He's just like in bed, like while whittling the hunter's symbol. It's really goofy, but clearly this is affecting him a lot more than he realized. The next morning, Matt's in Jeremy's room, sitting on his bed while Jeremy's getting ready, and he asks him, how do you wake up with a knife in your hand and not remember how it got there? It's that hunter's mark, Jer. It's messing with you. Which is a very logical conclusion to come to, but for some reason, Jeremy is still in denial and then goes into another direction. And Jeremy's like, what happens if what happened to Alark is happening to me? I've probably died too many times with the Gilbert ring on my finger, and I'm developing an alter ego like he did. Which, like, I can see how Jeremy's mind would go there because he did just die and come back to life the other day from the ring, but the ring's only brought him back twice, and I think the ring brought Alark back to life like 4 or 5 times before he really went crazy. So you know, it's possible, but it's unlikely. What's more likely is the fact that he's become a hunter, and Connor has told him that hunters have a strong urge to kill vampires. So he's clearly in denial because this is going to create a lot of problems for him, and he's for some reason just not willing to accept that, even though it would be a lot more helpful if he did. And also in the previous episode, when he was going to like activate being a hunter and go from a potential to a hunter, Bonnie took him aside and said she was going to tell him what he was in for before he agreed to it. So surely she told him like, hey, by the way, like, just so you know, there's a chance you're gonna have a really strong urge to kill vampires. So for some reason, he's just in an intense amount of denial. Matt then reads an excerpt from one of Professor Shane's research that says newly awakened hunters may not be fully conscious of their actions. Their subconscious pushes through until the urge becomes a basic instinct. And he says, you're not having a psychotic break, Jer. You either tell Elena or I will. And Jeremy's like, okay, fine, I'll tell her when I see her. He then receives a text from Stefan asking him to meet him in the Lockwood cellar and not tell anyone. So he doesn't say anything to Matt, who says, we should really be going right now. Like, do you need a ride? But Jeremy tells him, no, go ahead, I'll meet you there. Which Matt should be suspicious of why he's not coming with him, but you know, we can't give Matt too much credit. Over at the Miss Mystic Falls pageant, up in one of the dressing rooms in the Lockwood mansion, Caroline is with Delena and they're talking to April, who's asking for advice on which dress she should wear, picking between either this like chill blue dress or a red dress that's like kind of a boob tube dress. Both of the girls think that she should pick the blue one for sure, but April's like, I don't know though, like, isn't the blue one a little too safe? But Elena says that safe's good when it comes to the judges, and Caroline's like, she's right. Gracie Lockwood had a 3-foot slit her year and practically got laughed off the court. They're all laughing, having a bit of giggling. It's a bit of pageant politics, but then Damon comes in saying she's got my vote. Kind of creepy. Maybe don't make that comment about high school girls. But Caroline throws something small at Damon and yells, get out, lurker. Although Elena seems kind of happy to see him, but also a little bit nervous. She's like looking around, trying to like avoid eye contact with him. Damon's like, ouch, and then asks, where's Professor Shane? And Caroline says, go check the judges table. And she goes to close the door in his face, but Damon opens it back up and says, the red one, definitely, referring to the dress. And Caroline says, we've already agreed the red one's a little bit too showy. And Damon's like, it's a pageant. Isn't that the whole point? Which I don't really know that much about pageants, but Caroline does, of course, and she rightfully says, did you win Miss Mystic Falls last year? No, I didn't think so. Damon says neither did Elena, and she wore blue. Which, what does that mean? Because Caroline didn't wear red, she wore green. So the logic doesn't really track here. The reason Elena didn't win is because she didn't deserve to. She was not involved in anything with the town. Of course, she was dealing with her parents' death, so she didn't really have the energy to be involved. That's totally fine. But Caroline is involved and was involved in everything, so she very much did deserve to win. I don't think that they won based on what color dress they had. Anyways, Caroline says no one cares what you think, but April says I do because she's clearly so obsessed with male validation. Damon says, see, April cares. Red, right, Elena? Elena, who until this point has been making bashful eyes towards Damon, acting all coy, trying not to like linger too much with eye contact with him, finally has to like look at him and acknowledge that he's actually there, and she's like, yeah, the red's pretty. And Damon's like, and my work here is done. And he goes to leave, and Caroline's like to Elena, what just happened? 30 seconds ago you said you hated the red one. What happened to safe is good? Which this dress is clearly a metaphor for Elena's choice with Damon and Stefan, with Stefan being the safe choice and Damon being like the risky choice. You know, there's a lot of metaphors and parallels in this episode. It's kind of fun, it's kind of cute. The writers knew what they were doing. But Elena has this look on her face like, yeah, why did I change my mind so quickly? But then just says to April, just wear whichever one you want. And she goes to leave, and Caroline's like, what the hell just happened? The scene seems so random and inconsequential if you haven't like seen the episode or you don't remember it, but it becomes really important later on. So that's why I kind of went in depth on it, even though it's just like they're just talking about dresses. What's the big deal? Damon then goes downstairs and Elena quickly catches up to him and says they need to talk. He's at the bottom of the stairs and she's walking down. Once again, another callback to when she was walking down the stairs at her Miss Mystic Falls pageant and Damon was at the bottom. There's a lot of metaphors, parallels, and callbacks in this episode. The writers are really cooking in this one. When Elena gets to the bottom of the stairs, Damon says, Stefan told me about the breakup. I'd say I'm sorry, but I'm not, which we've been knowing. Obviously, that's why he didn't apologize to Stefan, because he didn't want to lie. Elena asks what Stefan said, and Damon's like, oh, you know, Stefan, the guy just went on and on about it, wouldn't shut up. He's kind of being a bit awkward because he wonders if the reason they broke up was because of him, but he doesn't want to be presumptuous about it. Elena confirms, so he didn't tell you why, and Damon says, no, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with why you're acting weird, so why don't you tell me? And Elena pauses for a moment and then says,
You.
and now Damon lets out his smile because he has the confirmation that the reason they broke up is because of Elena's feelings for him, and he is so happy. There are sparks flying between the two of them. They're staring into each other's eyes longingly, passionately, intensely. It feels like they're about to kiss, but then they get interrupted by Professor Shane. Shane says, Damon Salvatore, looks like we're traveling in the same circuit. Yeah, because you're both grown men who hang out around high schools. Damon says, Professor Shane, just the guy I wanted to see. And he goes to walk towards Professor Shane so they can chat, but he looks back at Elena as she goes, and she smiles, clearly feeling really happy with the choices she's making. So Shane and Damon are walking outside amongst people, and Damon says, so I'm in search for another hunter. Shane says, why? I thought you said you had a potential, but Damon says, I did, but he ended up being a potential problem. Shane says, there's nothing I can do to help you, and Damon says, okay, well, why don't you help me with this then? Why are you here? What's your little lesson plan here, Professor? And this is good. It's good people are finally starting to be suspicious of this guy, and it took Matt Donovan of all people to start the crusade. Shane says, you think too highly of me, Damon. He goes to leave, but Damon stops him and says, hey, no pity votes for April Young, by the way. I mean, just because her dad blew up the council doesn't mean she should get a tiara. But then again, you knew him, didn't you? Because I heard the two of you racked up quite the hefty phone bill. This was an amazing segue by Damon, truly. And Shane, you probably should have got a burner phone, but it's a little bit too late for that now. And he says, look, Damon, if you want to know something about me, just go ahead and ask. Then Damon does ask and says, how did you convince Pastor Young to kill all of those people? And Shane's like, did you just accuse me of mass murder in the middle of a high school pageant? Damon smiles and they just look at each other, but Shane just walks away. Then Carol Lockwood comes on stage to MC, starts her speech welcoming everyone to this year's Mystic Falls, saying they're excited to showcase their most outstanding community leaders in the making. Not sure if April Young fits that criteria, but I digress. We're not that interested in the pageant politics this year around. We then go over to the Lockwood cellar where Jeremy comes in to find Stefan and is like, what am I doing here? And Stefan ominously says, getting the chance to make your sister human again. You interested? Jeremy, who at this point is now having dreams of killing his vampire sister, says, you have no idea. So Jeremy comes into the cellar and notices the criminal chained up and asks, who's that? And Stefan cavalierly says, oh, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that you're a vampire hunter and he's a vampire. Stefan then flips open a pocket knife, grabs Jeremy's wrist and slices it, force-feeding his blood to the guy. So the criminal completes his transition. He has his fangs, his eyes, the whole shebang. And it's very unlike Stefan to behave this way. He's being very aggressive towards Jeremy. But you know what? He is super motivated because Klaus really put a fire under him. And in his mind, he's operating under this whole idea throughout this episode that if Elena is cured, she's going to be herself again and she's going to want to be with him again. So he's doing anything to make that happen. Jeremy's really shocked by Stefan's behavior and is like, you're doing all this just so that I can stake him? And Stefan says, do you think I want to do this, Jeremy? Look at me. I hate this. I don't want to do this. But your sister isn't supposed to be a vampire and we need to help her. Now he's a murderer and he'll gladly kill again. So do it, Jeremy. Kill him. Kind of defeats the point of being a vampire hunter if you're just going to turn humans into vampires and then kill them, because the whole point of being a vampire hunter is to kill vampires. And now technically this guy is a vampire, but he only became a vampire for the purpose of dying for the hunter. So the witch who made the hunter's curse, I know she's pissed about this, but I digress. It is a loophole and it's quicker than finding actual vampires for Jeremy to kill. And I'm okay with the morals of this. Just find guilty, horrific criminals who have no remorse, turn them into vampires and kill them. The logic tracks in my eyes, so I'm with Stefan on this. So Stefan shoves a wooden stake in Jeremy's hand and then he grabs the guy by the chains and gives him some slack. So this guy is like trying to lunge towards Jeremy and like bite him and stuff, kind of like a crazed dog on a leash. Jeremy's like really disgusted by this and it's like, why are you doing this, Stefan? What the hell is wrong with you? Jeremy, why do you keep asking the same question? Stefan already told you. So Stefan yells back and is like, do it, Jeremy, or I'll rip the chains off for real. Now do it. So Jeremy does. He stakes the guy, killing him, but then just keeps staking him. It's like overkill, and Stefan's like, enough, okay? And Jeremy looks kind of freaked out because he's like, oh, kind of lost my cool there. That was some real rage, you know? Looks like every kill he makes by a vampire, he gets more and more rageful and hateful, just like how Connor was. So Jeremy's on quite the scary path, and Stefan is doing it behind Elena's back. But then again, Jeremy signed up for this. Jeremy's okay with it. He's going along with it. Sure, Stefan manipulated and coerced him, but at the end of the day, what else was he gonna do? Once you've set on this trajectory in this path, there's not much else you can do. You can't just like unbecome a hunter. So back at the Miss Mystic Falls pageant, Caroline is clearing empty glasses from tables, and she goes over to one of the waiters and is like, hey, why am I bussing your table? I said no empty glasses. It's interesting how when Carol Lockwood acts this way, it comes across bitchy, but when Caroline does it, it's like, okay, well, she's running a tight ship. Do what she said. Like, it's not that hard. She also then goes over to the musicians and says, will you guys pick up the tempo? This is a pageant, not a funeral. Which, to be fair, that's probably where they play most of their music. It is Mystic Falls. People are dying left, right, and center. Parston shows up behind Caroline in a suit looking very dapper, and he says, now how am I doing? And Caroline is like, ugh, you're perfect, which is just so beyond annoying. I can't even look at you. You're getting flirty up in here. Klaus smiles, and I'm loving this bad time, so is he. He then notices Haley walking with Tyler over a bridge coming into the event and says, well, they didn't waste any time, did they? Caroline looks at them pretending to be bothered, or maybe she is bothered, and then just says, let's just get today over with. We then go over to Haley and Tyler. She grabs the tiara off of like the little podium, the real tiara, and is making fun of the pageant girls, saying, oh my god, I can't believe that I won. I just want to thank the judges for seeing past the fact that I'm a raging bitch. She's very much giving pick me, making fun of the pageant. It's like, girl, whatever. Tyler says, you don't want to do that. These girls will cut you. They have nails. And Haley's like,
I have claws.
a really lame werewolf joke, especially considering the only time you do have claws is the full moon. So the rest of the time with your unmanicured nails, the girls with the nails can actually cut you. Haley just really comes across as unlikable in these episodes, I swear. Caroline then goes on stage to start the proceedings. She says, hi everyone, I'm Caroline Forbes. As the reigning Miss Mystic Falls, it's my honor to introduce this year's Miss Mystic Court. Everyone applauds, and then we see Damon and Elena across from each other in the crowd. They cannot stop staring at each other, because obviously they haven't gotten to finish the conversation, and Miss Mystic Falls is also a very reminiscent event for them. Caroline's introducing all the contestants in the background, and Matt comes over to Elena and asks her if Jeremy has told her about these nightmares that he's been having, which clearly he hasn't. Elena's surprised by this, but before they can really get into it, she then notices April is about to get caught next, and she's like, oh no, April's gonna get abandoned. Like, okay, who cares? But anyway, of course that's gonna affect her because she sort of likes April still, I guess, and also, you know, she was abandoned, the whole, like, we get it, like the parallels, except Elena, Stefan, and Damon compared to April, Matt, and Jeremy, it's just not the same. But anyway, Matt runs over to be April's escort, and he is down at the bottom trying to be who Damon was when he did it for Elena, trying to give a Damon grin, but it just comes across as goofy. It does born one of the most famous Matt Donovan memes where he's pulling that stag face. And when April gets to the bottom of the stairs, she says to Matt, where's Jeremy? And he's like, oh, you know, he got stuck at work. But I'm here. And she's like, I guess she'll do. And she's smirking because in her mind, once again, she thinks she's in a love triangle with Jeremy and Matt, even though neither could really care for her. But honestly, Matt, you might as well take her up on that. What's your other option? Rebecca? Who's in a coffin right now, so what's she gonna do? So the contestants and the escorts are all doing their near touch on, and Damon and Elena cannot stop staring at each other, obviously being like, oh my god, remember when we did that? Like, when you saved me when I was about to get abandoned, and then we did the near touch dance. Ugh. It's all cutesy and everything, but Elena, you really should be more concerned where your brother is. And Caroline then comes over to Elena and is like, hey, what was up with the last minute switch up? And Elena's like, I don't know where Jeremy is. Damon then comes over to them and says, do the math. Emo teen, open bar, it's fine. Which, that's not really Jeremy's thing anymore. Maybe back in season 1 when he was like, you know, getting drunk, smoking weed, all that kind of stuff, but he doesn't really do that anymore, and it's not that hard to underage drink in this town, so why would he have to hide it? Elena tells them what Matt told her about Jeremy having nightmares about killing vampires and how he's been hiding it from her. But Damon says, relax, I'm sure he's fine. And Elena's like, I don't know, I have a really bad feeling about this. And Damon's like, look, if I'm not worried, you shouldn't be worried. Let it go. Which makes no sense. All Elena does is worry about her little brother. Worrying about Jeremy is like one of her 5 personality traits. Caroline tells Elena, okay, you go home, see if Jeremy's there. I'll start asking people around here if anyone's seen him. Elena all of a sudden is no longer concerned, ever since Damon told her not to be, and says, well, maybe Damon's right. Maybe Jeremy grabbed a bottle from the bar and snuck off into the woods. Very strange for her to just believe Damon, considering she seemed so worried before he came into the picture. Anyway, Caroline says, no, Damon's never right. Damon is sneaky and manipulative and rude, but he's never right. How can you not see that? She's laying it on a little bit heavy, but she tried to be nice earlier. She's stressed, I get it, she's frustrated. Elena's response to Caroline is, I don't know, but why do I think you won't hesitate to tell me? So Caroline's like, okay, well, you asked.
Fine, friend-intervention.
Fine, friend-intervention. I think your so-called feelings for Damon are really starting to cloud your judgment, and I don't like it. And the thought of the two of you together makes me want to barf. She is killing me. Look, it's probably not the best choice of words. Probably could have left out the part about wanting to barf, but the first part rings true. Elena's feelings towards Damon are clearly clouding her judgment, and she's failing to see that. I wonder why. Klaus then comes over to them and says to Caroline, "Easy, love, you're making a scene." And Elena says, "Wow, Caroline, thank you for making this difficult time so much easier." And she goes to leave. Okay, Elena, whatever. Caroline then says to Klaus, "How did I become the bad guy?" And Klaus is like, "Let's go get you a drink. I'll tell you all about being the bad guy." He smiles, it's cute. He's being very boyfriend material. So Damon's back in the dressing room in the Lockwood house, and he's on the phone with Stefan saying, "Please don't tell me that you've roped Jeremy into a world of crazy." But Stefan says, "I had no choice. Elena needs a cure." And Damon's like, "Oh right, so you can turn her back into the girl who's still in love with you?" Which, yeah, I can see why Damon thinks this, but to be fair, Stefan did want to get the cure for Elena before they broke up, and also because he knows that Elena never wanted to be a vampire. He even said as much to her in the first episode of the season when Elena was in her transition, and Damon was like, "Oh, just complete it, what's the big deal?" And Damon reminds him, he's like, "You were not there when Elena told me she never wanted this." Back in season 2 when Damon had fed her vampire blood before the sacrifice. So like, there's layers to it. I do think Stefan, wants to do this for Elena partially because he knows that she doesn't want this, but sure, I mean, I think he'd be lying to himself if he said there wasn't a part of him that was like, this isn't who she's supposed to be. Like, I need the old Elena back, the old Elena who wants to be with me. It's multi-layered. It's not that simple. So Stefan says to Damon, I get why you wouldn't want to believe it, but she isn't herself anymore. And Damon's like, "Of course you would think that. Leave it alone, Stefan." But Stefan's not going to leave it alone, so he hangs up the phone and goes over to Jeremy, who's looking down at his arm and seeing his hunter's mark begin to grow. And Stefan asks him how much it grew because he can't see it. Remember, it's invisible to anyone besides hunters and potentials. And he pulls out the drawing that Jeremy made of Connor's tattoo and says, "Show me on the drawing how far it's grown." But Jeremy's ignoring him, and Stefan's like, "Hey, Jeremy, show me how far the tattoo grew." But Jeremy says, "Sorry, Stefan, I can't trust you." So Stefan says, "Answer me or I will make you answer." He's being really intense, and Jeremy says, "I'm not telling you anything." So Stefan grabs Jeremy and tries to compel him, even though he should remember from Connor that hunters cannot be compelled, but he's overwhelmed, he's stressed, maybe he doesn't realize that. So Jeremy stakes Stefan in the gut, but not in the heart, and he says, "Guess I can't be compelled anymore," and he leaves. Which honestly, big ups for Jeremy, because besides April Young, Jeremy has been one of the people in the show who's been compelled the most. He has been compelled against his will many a times to do many a things he did not want to do and forget many a things he wanted to remember. So kind of tea for him that he can't be compelled anymore. Back at the Lockwood mansion, Klaus and Caroline are walking along the big pond that they have on their property there, away from like the pageant crowd. Klaus has a champagne bottle and 2 glasses in his hands, so he's getting the vibes going. Caroline, however, is still stuck on Elena, and she's venting, saying, "It's just, as her best friend, it's my duty to warn her when she's making a giant mistake, right?" And now she's taking Damon's side on everything. Klaus says, "So being a vampire has changed her." And Caroline's like, "Well, yeah, but being a vampire only amplifies who you already are. It doesn't turn you into a completely different person." Klaus smiles in response to that and says, "Very peculiar." And Caroline's like, "What's that look about?" And Klaus is like, "Well, it'll all make sense eventually." And she's like, "Okay, whatever." So clearly Klaus knows something that Caroline doesn't. He sees the writing behind the walls and what's going on here. Because of course, Klaus knows more than any of these people do. I mean, he has been alive for 1,000 years after all. So they sit down on a bench and Caroline says, "Just hurry up and find the cure." And Klaus says, "I'm working on it, love." There's a bit of a moment, and then Caroline asks Klaus if he would ever take the cure. And he says, "Now why would I want to cure myself of being the most powerful creature on the planet, And Caroline's like, "What? So there's not a single moment in your whole life that you wanted to be human?" Klaus just gives her a smile and doesn't say anything because, he doesn't want to get into that. It was a little too vulnerable just now, but it is interesting that she's trying to get to know him. So he pops the bottle of champagne and asks Caroline, "Well, how about you?" We then go over to Tyler, who's back in the pageant crowd, and he's watching the two of them from afar, laughing, drinking champagne. He is seething, looking really pissed, looking really jealous. Clearly he sees that Caroline isn't entirely faking this. She's enjoying her time with Klaus a little bit too much for his liking. Even he can't deny the chemistry between them. We go back up to Caroline and Klaus says, "Life used to be a lot easier. Don't you miss the days of being..." And he pulls out a piece of paper from his pocket and says, "Chair of the Miss Mystic Falls Beautification Committee and the director of the policeman's yearly raffle?" Caroline freaks out and is like, "Is that my Miss Mystic Falls application? Where did you get that?" She tries to grab it, but Klaus stands up and is holding it away from her while continuing to read it. And he continues to read it, saying, "When I am chosen, I intend to refine excellence."
Really enjoying your use of when here. It's very confident.
"And above all, I promise to aspire, inspire, and perspire." Obviously, we found a shortage of words ending in spire. Caroline's like, yeah, very funny. It's hilarious. And she keeps trying to grab it back, but Klaus is holding the letter away from her. He pulls a little bit of a face from her, and she's like, pretending to be annoyed, but really, she's enjoying herself. So she bursts out laughing. He's laughing. This is so freaking cute. Oh my god, I'm getting goosebumps. This is such a cute Caroline scene. I love them. But we go back over to Tyler, who's still been eavesdropping on them with his hybrid vampiring, and he's clearly not loving this. He's just hurting himself. He honestly should have tapped out and not listened to the whole interaction, but I mean, you can't help yourself, I guess. We then go over to Damon, who's sitting at a table, and he notices Professor Shane sitting at a table with Haley, and he's pouring her champagne. The two of them are laughing, and he clocks that as interesting. Tyler walks past him, and Damon stops him and is like, how do those two know each other? And Tyler's like, they don't. Paranoid much? But no, he's not being paranoid, he's being observant. And Damon says the council just got burnt to a crisp, some mysterious hunter just blew through town, and this guy just happens to know everything about everything. So yes, I am paranoid. And you know, in Tyler's pea-brain, he's listening to all that like, oh yeah, ooh, that is a little bit suspicious, because he totally did not think of that on his own. We then catch up with Jeremy, who has made it to the Lockwood house. He's in the dressing room, and he's gearing up with a bunch of weapons, putting them under his suit, and he goes into the crowd, which, like, I'm not sure what he thinks he's gonna do. Like, does he think he's gonna kill Elena, like, in the middle of everyone? But it gets interrupted by April, who asks where he's been, and he says he's been held up at he says he's been held up at work, and April doesn't buy that, and she's like, Jeremy, look, if you were too chicken to do the whole dance thing, you should have just told me. But Jeremy's like, no, like, I knew the dance. I watched the lesson online like 100 times. He's probably lying just to save face, but April's like, OMG, like, you did? She thinks he likes her, even though he continuously blows her off. Like, girl, stand up. Jeremy then spots Professor Shane in the crowd and asks what he's doing there. And April's like, oh, he's a judge. I talked to him about my dad because he knew him, and he said that he never seemed depressed or suicidal or anything. So that's good. And that seems good enough for April. Honestly, she's been talking about her dad, like, on and on and on, but she's not really getting anywhere. She doesn't have the brains to, like, really see all the sinister stuff going on. Which then again, why would she? She doesn't know anything about the supernatural people. Jeremy then spots Elena in the crowd and glares at her, looking angry, and April's like, what are you looking at? And Jeremy says to her, your dad was doing the right thing for this town. The whole council was. They died heroes. He leaves, and poor April is just standing there, more confused than she was before. She'd finally come to peace about her dad's death, and now she's suspicious once again. This girl can never know a day of peace. And for once, no one compels her today, so she just has to sit with this. Damon then finds Professor Shane in the Lockwood house in some room alone for some reason, and Shane's like, you again? I must be the least intimidating mass murderer ever. And Damon's like, well, you still never gave me a name, and it's kind of urgent. And Shane says there is no other name. The way that the Brotherhood of the Five works is that at any given moment there are 5 hunters in existence, alright? Most of them have no idea who they are or what their purpose is. It means finding more than one in a lifetime is next to impossible. He goes to leave because he said his piece, but Damon vamp speeds in front of him, and Shane's like, huh, subtle. And Damon's like you didn't already know. You have 5 seconds to give me another name or you die. Damon, I get why you think he might be lying, but his explanation for why he doesn't know of another hunter is also extremely reasonable, especially because Stefan already told you there's only 5 hunters at a given time, and then it might take them centuries to find one before they knew that Jeremy was a potential. Shane, who doesn't seem scared at this point, says, you know, it's genuinely unwise for a vampire to seek out a hunter, so I'm betting that means that you're interested in the hunter's mark and probably what it leads to. But here's the thing, even if you complete the mark and you get the map, the thing that you're looking for is sealed with a spell that only a certain witch can perform. Damon asks what kind of witch, which Damon, why do you even have to ask at this point? It's always the same kind of witch. But alas, Damon doesn't realize it, and he grabs Shane's arm really hard and asks again, but Shane says, come on, Damon, you're a big boy, you can figure it out. And after far too long of thinking, his brain's really not switched on today, Damon realizes, ugh, a Bennett witch, which he really isn't a fan of Bonnie at the moment because famously she hasn't really had her powers since the beginning of the season, and he says in response to the whole Bennett witch thing, aren't too many of those lying around, as I'm sure you know. So this explains why he was working at Whitmore College, where Bonnie's gram Sheila Bennett was working. He took over her role. I'm not sure if he was planning on like using Sheila as the witch once he did what he needed to do and then she died, and he was kind of bummed, but then he tracked down Bonnie because remember that he invited her to Whitmore College, so he's got a lot going on in the background. This man is an orchestrator, and we'll get into it because there's just layers upon layers when it comes to Professor Shane. So Shane says none of this will matter until Bonnie is in touch with her magic. Damon realizes, obviously Shane, so he lets go of him, and Shane says, I guess you just realize you need me alive. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a scholarship to award. And he leaves, and Damon is pissed because this human guy just keeps having the power over him. Shane's smart, I gotta say. Back outside at the pageant, Carol and Caroline announced the winner of Miss Mystic Falls this year, and it is April Young, which who knows if she deserves it because we didn't hear her pitch or know the other contestants, but I'm just gonna brush past this moment. Elena, who's on stage 2 for some reason, I don't know why she is, she spots Jeremy walking through the crowd, and she goes to follow him back into the house, and Matt notices that this is all happening as well, and he's looking really concerned. So Jeremy's sitting in the dressing room cutting his hand with a stake. room, cutting his hand with a steak when Elena comes in asking where he's been. She notices he's holding the steak and asks what he's doing with that and to put it down, but he does not. And Jeremy gets up and goes over to Elena with the steak, saying, Connor was right. All I can think about is killing vampires. Which I don't know why he's so obsessed with just killing Elena when there's plenty of other vampires around that he can kill. I mean, prime example, earlier he stabbed Stefan in the gut when he could have stabbed him in the heart and killed him. I don't know if it's like something to do with like the hunter's curse where it's like trying to make him kill a vampire who he's really close to so that he can like, you know, push past having any empathy for vampires by killing a vampire that would be the hardest for him to kill. Kind of like how when Connor was talking about in episode 5, how he had a friend who was turned and he said he would have it under control, but he didn't, so he had to kill him. And Jeremy was shocked that he killed his friend. Like, I think it's kind of to do with that, but they don't explicitly say, but I can only assume that's the reason because what other reason would there be? Anyways, Elena tells Jeremy, you're nothing like Connor. And Jeremy says, I want to believe that. I know I don't want to hurt you, but everything inside of me is telling me to drive the stake through your heart. And Elena's like, oh, why would you say that? It's me, Jeremy. And Jeremy's like, you're a vampire. And Elena's like, yeah, but I'm also your sister. I mean, cousin, if you want to get technical. But anyway, she says, I would never do anything to hurt you. Girl, you... Sorry. You just stabbed him in the neck like 2 days ago. I know you were like under a curse of your own, but like, you know, neither of you want to hurt each other. It doesn't mean that you won't. She's holding Jeremy's hand at this point to really get through to him, but then she notices something, looks down, pulls open Jeremy's hand to see that he's bleeding, and her eyes go all red and veiny, and Jeremy's like, no. Like he's shocked when it's like, she's a new vampire, you just put blood in front of her. Elena tells him to get that away from her, and she goes to try and leave, but Jeremy comes up from behind her to try and stake her, but she vamp speeds, flips him around, and shoves him to the ground, and she freaks out because Jeremy looks like he's passed out. She goes to check on him like, wake up, Jeremy.
Please wake up.
He then wakes up and stabs her in the neck with a little piece of wood that he had hidden under his sleeve. Come on, Elena, like this was obviously a fake out. But at least Jeremy got her back for stabbing him in the neck, so now they're equal. So Elena's bleeding from her neck, gasping like she's gasping for air, when Jeremy lifts up a full-size steak, about to finish her off, but then Matt quickly comes in and tells Jeremy, you don't want to do this, Jeremy. That's your sister. It's that stupid mark on your arm. Jeremy yells at him saying, shut up, Matt. But Matt tells him, Jeremy, look at me. I'm human, and I'm telling you not to hurt her. Jeremy's looking at Elena, holding the steak above her. He's hesitating, not moving, trying to figure out what to do. But before he can, Stefan quickly vamp speeds into the room, taking Jeremy away from Elena and telling Matt to get Jeremy out of there. So Jeremy does. And Stefan goes over to Elena to help her. She's struggling to get the piece of wood out of her neck. So Stefan takes it out of her neck. It starts to heal. And he's holding the side of her face. It's a really sweet, tender moment. They're looking into each other's eyes. It's the first time that they've seen each other since they broke up. And it's kind of like a moment of like, we still care about each other, which of course you do, but it's a sweet moment. So Haley and Tyler are sitting on some steps outside drinking, and Haley's like, your mom parties even harder than you. Does she have the werewolf gene? And Tyler's like, nah, my dad did. What about your parents? I'm surprised this isn't something they spoke about when they were like hanging out in the mountains. You know, I thought they were close, but it works because we as an audience need to learn a little bit more about Haley so that we know her motivations. And she says, I never met my parents. My adoptive parents found out about my wolf gene when I did. The night I turned and tore apart their living room, and they promptly kicked me out. Which is just funny. Like, they just came home and their daughter was a wolf and they just assumed it was her. Or did they see her as a wolf and then see her go back into a human and were like, get out? Like, I don't know how that worked, but it sounds sad. And Tyler says, you never told me how you triggered the curse, and Haley says, you mean who I killed? Boating accident. We were drunk. I thought I wasn't. So we get some interesting background on Haley. Tyler then changes the subject, asking her, what's up with you chatting all these old timers up? My mom and that professor guy. And Haley's like, that professor guy is like 30 and he's hot and super smart. She's like laughing. Like, Tyler asks Haley if she knows Professor Shane or something, but she's like, no, I just met him. Why? And Tyler's like, no reason. He's not really playing it off well, but she doesn't seem to read into it too much. And besides, they get distracted because Tyler then spots Caroline walking with Klaus arm in arm. So he starts to eavesdrop on their conversation, and we go over to them to see Tyler say this really beautiful thing to Caroline. It's a really, really sweet moment, so I'm just going to read it out. He says to her, I never answered your question if I thought about ever being human. Once I was on a trek in the Andes, and a hummingbird flew up to me. It just hovered there, staring at me. Its tiny heart was pattering like a machine gun, and I thought, what a thing, you know, to have to work that hard every day just to stay alive, to be constantly on the verge of death. And how satisfying it must be every day to have survived. And that was the only time I ever thought about being human. It's a really sweet moment because Klaus loves being a hybrid and a vampire and all that. Like, he doesn't want to be human at all. And there's no way he would ever tell anyone this. I don't think he ever would. It's a really touching moment that he opened up to Caroline that way and was being vulnerable. It kind of harkens back to in season 3 at the ball when he was talking about some of the abuse that he endured from his father Michael and how much he hated him. And he told Caroline the closest his father ever got to him was the day he severed his favorite horse's head. And that was like a really vulnerable moment. So it's a great Caroline episode. I get emo. And this is our last Caroline scene in this episode, so kind of sad. Well, we then go back to Tyler and Haley, who can't eavesdrop because she's a wolf, says, "What are they saying?" And Tyler's like,
"A bunch of BS about being human."
The sooner we get rid of this guy, the better. So now he's even more motivated to get rid of Klaus because he's hitting on his girlfriend and Caroline clearly seems to like him. Outside the front of the Lockwood mansion, Elena is walking to leave, holding her shoes in one hand and a cloth in the other up to her bloody neck. Not sure why, because it's healed, but maybe she just wants to cover the blood. Stefan runs up to her with a blood stain on his shirt from where Jeremy stabbed him. Like, is no one like, why do these two teenagers have blood all over them? I guess that's why they're trying to leave. So Stefan tells Elena to wait up and she says, "I have to find Jeremy. This shouldn't be happening to him." But Stefan stops her because he has to admit to her what he's done, and he says, "It's my fault. I'm starting to think that when a hunter kills a vampire, the urge to kill keeps growing stronger." You think? I thought we already knew this. Like, let's not pretend like you didn't know what you were getting into, Stefan. Elena realizes what Stefan means and says, "Tell me you haven't been with Jeremy this entire time. Tell me that you haven't been making him kill vampires, Stefan." But he can't, and he says, "Look, Elena, we need the map to the cure." But Elena says, "If getting my humanity back means stripping Jeremy of his, then I don't want the cure." And Stefan says, "Well, he's the only fix to all of this." But Elena pauses and reads through the line. She can read through the subtext, and she finally rips the band-aid off and says, "You mean me? The only way to fix me. Look, Stefan, you don't have to love me like this, but this is who I am now. The old Elena died when she went off that bridge, so you need to let her go." They look at each other for a moment. It's really sad, but then Stefan notices Damon walking up behind Elena, and he gets pissed, so he leaves. And honestly, Damon, you couldn't have left them alone, just given them the respect to, like, have this conversation. You just had to butt in. He didn't say anything, but, like, him coming over there was just not necessary, but I digress. But you know what? This was an important thing for Elena to say and for Stefan to acknowledge, and I do think what he did today with Jeremy was kind of wrong, and it's not fair to Jeremy because now he's, like, been pushed into this mess. But at the same time, he was already getting there last episode. He already killed a vampire to take Elena out of her curse and activate himself being a hunter. So, like, all Stefan did was kind of speed along the process. But at the same time, Stefan's inability to let Elena go is making him be selfish and reckless, which is not usually how he behaves when he's not in Ripper mode or healing from no humanity mode. And he's clearly holding on to this idea that if Elena gets cured, she's going to be her old self again and she'll want to be with him. But her saying this to him, like, that girl's dead. I'm different. And, like, she died when I went off that bridge. Like, she had to say to him, like, I'm never going to be that way again, cure or not, you know? And I think it is stupid for Stefan to expect that if Elena is cured into a human, she's just going to go back. Like, you can't erase everything that's happened. But he's heartbroken and he's grieving their relationship and he's grasping for straws on, you know, trying to fix things. I mean, if we look at the stages of grief that, you know, Elena experienced when she became a vampire and was grieving herself, Stefan grieving their relationship, he's in that, like, bargaining phase of their relationship. He had the anger, he's in the bargaining, like, he's gonna go through the depression soon, and let's see if he ever gets to the acceptance. Or maybe he will get Elena cured, and maybe she will be her old self again and get back to him. Either way, it's messy, messy boots galore. So it's nighttime now, and we go over to the Gilbert house where Jeremy is packing a bag, and Matt comes into his room asking what he's doing, and Jeremy's like, "I can't keep living here if I want to kill my sister," which, fair point. But Matt says, "Elena knows that. That's why she moved out, and she asked me to move in and keep an eye on you," which is nice for Matt, quite the upgrade to the place where he lives. And also, it allows him and Jeremy's friendship to develop further and further. And he says, "Look, Jer, I'm not one of them. I'll keep an eye on you, and we can keep this hunter business in check." It's a really sweet moment, but Jeremy does ask, "Where's Elena gonna go? And where do you guys think she's gonna go?" Well, we go over to the Salvatore house where Elena arrives with a bag. This is so messed up. She comes in to see both Damon and Stefan there and says, "I can't stay at home anymore." And Stefan's like, "Okay, pick a room. I'll crash somewhere else." So he leaves. So now he has to leave his house so that Elena can stay in her house, when it's like, Elena, you have plenty of other places where you could stay. You could stay with Bonnie. You could stay with Caroline. Even though she's mad at you, she would still let you stay with her. You could have stayed at Matt's house. We know that house is free. Like, you really did not need to stay at the Salvatore house. Not only is it not fair to Stefan because now he's uncomfortable and he has to leave, but you're staying in the house with Damon. Like, what kind of message is that going to send? This was just really messy of her to do. Really, 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 really messy boots galore. It's just a really bad look that you broke up with Stefan because you have feelings for his brother and now you're going to stay at his house with his brother. Stefan also Also, why are you okay with this? I mean, you're probably not okay with it, but like you could have said something. And also, it's a huge house. Surely you can be on one end or the other end and not run into each other. But I digress. We then go back to the barn where Tyler is with Kim, the hybrid. She's laying down exhausted, and she's like, "Ty, tell me it's over. I really don't think I could do this anymore." Girl, it sounds like you're still in pain. So doesn't that defeat the point? And Tyler's like, "It's over. Nice work. We're one step closer to ending this." So he's saying that she's unsired, which clearly she doesn't seem like she is because she's in pain. And also, how would you know? You'd have to test it by getting Klaus to ask her to do something and seeing if she will not do it. So it doesn't really make sense. Like, there's so many plot holes. I can't. It's a little too much. But we then go over to Haley, who is looking at a text from Tyler saying Kim broke the sire-bond. And we zoom out to see that Haley is in Professor Shane's office. So it looks like she does know him. Clearly she lied about that. And it's a lot worse because she's actually working with him. She smiles and says, "We got another one." And Shane says, "We're almost ready." Haley tells him, "I want to leave Tyler out of this when it all goes down." But Shane says, "We'll talk when you've broken the last." So clearly she is helping Tyler break these hybrid sire bonds, but for her, there is a sinister reason behind it. A lot more answers that we need to uncover in the next episode, but once again, Shane is working with someone else. He seems to have his sticky little fingers in multiple honeypots. Back at the Salvatore house, Elena is sitting down and Damon offers her a glass of bourbon and she drinks it, and he says, "I was just being polite. I thought you hated whiskey." But Elena says, "My brother wants to kill me." Damon sits with her and says, "Welcome to the club." Even it's not the same Damon. You're making a little joke, but like Elena's brother actually does want to kill her. Elena continues venting about how shit things are for her. She says, "Jeremy can't live with me. Stefan wants to fix me, and Caroline flat out admitted she doesn't like me this way. Think it's safe to say that I'm not so good at this vampire thing." Yeah, girl, we been new. You haven't been good at this vampire thing since the get-go. But there's a reason for it. Damon tries to make Elena feel better, but I also think he does believe this. He says, "You know what I think? I don't think I've ever seen you more alive." Which, I don't know what he means by this because she's had a miserable time ever since she turned.
I can't be a vampire.
Dear diary, I'm a vampire and I hate it. Part of me just wants to end it.
Maybe I'm better off dead. Let go of me. I'm so sick of crying. Matt, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Why do you care?
I care because I'm still me.
Who am I? Why am I acting like this?
Damon makes everything he wants sound like a good idea.
I should be here with Stefan. I killed them.
Elena then says that dance that they did today kind of reminded me of when, and Damon finishes her sentence and says, "When we danced together." Well, yeah, it's because it was the exact same dance at the exact same pageant. Of course it reminded you of it. Elena then says, "I wanted to dance with you today." So Damon takes her hand and they start to slow dance in front of the fireplace. They must be dancing in silence, but we hear the song "Kiss Me" by Ed Sheeran start to play, which, you know, if you aren't familiar with Ed Sheeran back in the day, you might be like, "Ugh, Ed Sheeran." But no, Ed Sheeran used to make really adorable, cute music. This is like the third Ed Sheeran song that we've had. We had "Gimme Love" in the season 3, episode 14, like the Masquerade Ball. No, not Masquerade, like the original ball. I swear we've had another Ed Sheeran song, but like "Kiss Me," Ed Sheeran, chef's kiss. It works really well for the scene. It's super romantic, even though it's messy, but I digress. We then go over to Caroline's house and Stefan's there with his bags because he's crashing there. Stefan's pouring them both a glass of bourbon because I guess he brought his bourbon with him. And he says, "Elena's right. I just need to let her go." And at this point, I hate to say it, but you probably should. Otherwise, it's just coming across as like desperate and you're setting yourself up for heartbreak. But I get wanting to fight for their relationship. But I mean, when she literally tells you, "Let me go, I'm not the same," what else are you going to do? It's true. Elena's not the same person she was when he fell in love with her. And do you really want to be with her when she's got feelings for your brother? It's really messy, and Stefan's about ready to give up, but Caroline's not ready to go down without a fight. She says, "No, Stefan, you're right. It's not pretty and it's not easy, but you can't give up on her." But Stefan says, "Caroline, she looked me in the eye and told me to move on." And Caroline's like, "She's lost, okay? You and her."
Epic.
Her and Damon?
Ugh.
I love the way that Caroline is talking about Elena and Damon in this episode. Like, ew, barf, ugh. Like, they're really bringing in that, like, teenage language that we often don't see anymore these days. So it's really funny. Caroline sits back, exhausted, and is like, "There's something wrong with her. Just promise me you're not going to stop looking for the cure." And Stefan says, "Klaus wouldn't let me even if I wanted to." And Caroline asks, why would he care? He doesn't even want it. Obviously, based on the conversation earlier when he says he doesn't want to be human. Also, Caroline, I guess, hasn't put 2 and 2 together. She hasn't really been too involved with the cure. So Stefan tells her that Klaus wants to make Elena human again so that he can make more hybrids. And Caroline says he's going to need them. Tyler has almost all of them sired. In this moment, Caroline has a big realization and just keeps saying, oh my God, over and over again. And Stefan's like, Caroline, what did you just realize? But before she can tell us, we go over to the Salvatore house where we see Elena and Damon dancing, and Damon spins Elena, and when she spins back into his arms, they kiss. Cute, it's romantic, but we then cut back to Caroline's house. So we're getting interrupted. It's like, what are we doing over here? So Caroline says to Stefan, I was trying to understand why Klaus was so intrigued by Damon and Elena. He said that I would figure it out. This was what he was talking about. Stefan's really confused about what Caroline's talking about, and she says, think about it. Every time Elena's had a problem, Damon's been the magic solution. We then cut back to Damon and Elena to see their kissing turning into hot and heavy making out. Back to Caroline, she says, today, Elena was worried about Jeremy. Who sweeps in and tells her to relax? Damon, and she listens. When Elena started feeding, who said she could only drink blood straight from the vein? Stefan's following her train of thought and says, Damon. Then go back to the Salvatore house where Elena vamp speeds Damon against a wall, breaking a lamp in the process. The making out is getting hotter and sexier and more vampiric. Back to Caroline, she goes on and says, and when Elena tried to drink from animals, Stefan continues and says, she couldn't keep it down.
She needs human blood, Stefan, from the vein. Vampires eat people. Trust me, you're gonna be miserable.
And Caroline says when Elena tried to drink from blood bags, Stefan finishes and says, same thing happened. She couldn't. Back to Damon and Elena. Elena rips Damon's shirt off. They're making out still. Back to Caroline. She says, name one vampire in the history of vampires that couldn't drink from a blood bag. Damon said she couldn't, so she couldn't. And this makes sense because I remember way back when I was watching this season when it was airing, I was like, why the hell can Elena not drink blood from a blood bag? Like, it's still human blood. Like, it doesn't make sense. We then go back to Damon. He vamp speeds Elena against another wall. They continue to make out. He pulls her leg up and she wraps it around him. It's getting hot and heavy. Back to Caroline. She says Damon likes the red dress. Elena likes the red dress. So that explains the whole red dress scene from earlier because we needed, to see evidence of what's going on in this episode. It was not all for nothing. Stefan provides more information of Elena doing exactly what Damon says when he recalls back to when Damon told Elena to kill Connor, so Elena did, even though she didn't want to kill anyone. That was back in episode 5. So Caroline says, what if it's possible Damon's blood turned Elena into a vampire, right? It's rare, but it happens. What if this is really happening? We see Damon and Elena making out again, and then we go back to Stefan, who says, Elena is sired to Damon. Boom. Mic drop. Before we can get into it, we go back to the Salvatore house and the music swells and we see Elena and Damon in his bed having hot, heavy vampire sex. And that is the end of the episode. Oh my God. Woo. Mic drop. One of the biggest plot twists in the show. When I was watching this for the first time, was flabbergasted. I was truly not expecting this. I did not at the time consider that sire-bonds were a thing outside of hybrids because yeah, we'd only ever seen it with Klaus and his hybrids, and to me that made sense because of the whole lore of like werewolves hate having to turn, it's a curse, it's painful, so like being a hybrid they turn on free will, so they're no longer in pain, so they're grateful to Klaus, therefore they're side to him, that whole thing. And it's really good as well because we've been having a lot of the parallels with Tyler and Haley unsiring Klaus's hybrids, so we've been really having the sire-bond front in mind, and then Klaus, of course, being someone who's super knowledgeable about the sire-bond, could probably see that with Elena and Damon as well. But I would have never suspected it at the time because they're vampires, not hybrids. I also love all of the clues leading up to this reveal that Caroline and Stefan discussed of like, Elena's struggles with like feeding on blood and like killing Connor, like all of these uncharacteristic things that Elena has been doing. It makes sense why now because she sided to Damon, so she does everything he says. Today when she wasn't worrying about Jeremy, that is a very strange, uncharacteristic thing of her to do, but Damon told her, don't worry about it. So she didn't. And Stefan even said to her when they were breaking up, like, Damon gets through to you in a way that I can't these days. And it's because she's sired to him. Like, it all makes sense so much because we've been focusing on so much in like these previous episodes of season 4, like the previous 7 episodes. It's been all about like, yes, Elena's transition, but also a lot about like the Brotherhood of the Five and the Hunters and the hybrids and all this kind of stuff. So we really haven't had enough time to like really think and wonder like, why is Elena not able to, feed on blood bags or animals? And we kind of all ignored that after it happened, even though they should have really looked into that more because that is very strange. Another one I want to mention is when Elena and Damon and Bonnie go to the Whitmore College frat party and Elena is feeding on people. Like, that just does not seem like the kind of thing that she would do.
Who am I? Why am I acting like this?
Because you listen to Damon. She's acting like a different person.
She is a different person.
Is that what you want? Her to be like?
like you.
So all of these times when she hasn't really been acting like herself, and you know why she's been getting closer to Damon is because of this. And I do have to say, I hate the sire-bond. I can imagine that like true Delena shippers, because I like Delena, but you know I lean more on the Stelena side. Fans would hate this, and I hate this. I think the sire-bond is crazy because it's like the writers really couldn't come up with a reasonable way for Elena to, you know, move on from Stefan and, you know, fall in love with Damon and it not, you know, be totally uncharacteristic of her, that they just did the sire-bond. I mean, sure, there probably would have been another way for them to do it, but the sire-bond just like fast tracks it. But it's also really problematic because it kind of like takes Elena's agency away, because she is now involved with this guy who she does everything he says without even realizing it. You know, we're gonna have to unpack this because it's not intentional. Like Damon obviously didn't know about this. I mean, no one did. So the next episode that we're gonna get into, we're gonna unpack the sire-bond a lot more, and that'll be in my next video covering episodes 8 and 9, where we discuss the sire-bond severely in depth. So make sure that you're subscribed and have the post notifications bell on so you don't miss that video. It'll be coming up very soon after this one. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it. I'd really appreciate your support. These videos take forever to make. And also comment down below your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Of course, my Patreon is linked down below as well if you want to check that out. And once again, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have an amazing day or night wherever you are in the world. Bye!